Chapter 1175. Although Wang Zhen already had a hunch that the background of the person behind the scenes definitely wasn't simple, after careful consideration, he felt a chill run down his spine. If even Gu Xuanji couldn't sense this person, then he had to be outside of order. As far as Wang Zhen knew, Wang Ling was the only person in the world who could jump out of order. Don't scare yourself. The enemy may be very strong, but he's definitely within control, said Loopy Toad. In any case, it was a demon king and had been by Wang Ling's side day and night for so long, so it had naturally learned a lot from him. Staying calm was the best way to deal with any unexpected situation. If this person really is outside of order, why did he choose to attack Earth? Loopy Toad raised the key question. While it was terrifying to be outside of order, there was a way to deal with it if it was within the 5 elements. The reason why the other party chose to attack Earth was definitely because there was something on Earth that the other party definitely wanted, and it was highly likely that this person could obtain new abilities or multiply and improve his original abilities. Considering the situation on 9 Dragon Mountain and the information it already knew about the other party's attempt to seize the 9 Dragon Mountain Heavenly Vein, Loopy Toad felt that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. The Heavenly Vein might just be a cover. What the other party wanted to seize might be something else. This person was outside of order, and even Gu Xuanji, the Keeper of Order, couldn't detect him. While 9 Dragon Mountain's Heavenly Vein Master Valve was the source of all the underground spirit veins on Earth, since the other party had an identity that even the Keeper of Order couldn't detect, why would he activate the Heavenly Vein Master Valve? The only reasonable explanation was that the other party definitely had another purpose. At the very least, activating the Heavenly Vein Master Valve wasn't to absorb the Heavenly Vein. Brother Dog has a point. Wang Zhen agreed with Loopy Toad's conjecture. If the other party simply wanted to seize the Heavenly Vein Master Valve, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. He had deliberately chosen to stir up trouble during the national competition. It was a little like he was deliberately sending a signal to make people think that he was going to seize the Heavenly Vein. Wang Zhen continued Loopy Toad's analysis. If the other party's goal is to seize the Heavenly Vein, going through so much trouble is a little suspicious. So what do you think is the most reasonable explanation? Everything is a cover. He doesn't want to seize the Heavenly Vein at all. He had chosen to act at this time to make everyone believe that he was here for the Vein of the Heavens. Apart from that, the most important thing is that the other party purposely resurrected so many people. It's highly likely that they're trying to disrupt our line of sight and stall for time. Speaking up to this point, Wang Zhen, Loopy Toad and Little Silver practically thought of the same keyword. That's right. It was the hour. Based on the above analysis, the most important condition of the mastermind's plan was all for the sake of time. A specific time, a specific characteristic, and then a specific action. In the world of cultivators, what kind of things needed to be considered in accordance with the hour? An array? Is the other party going to set up an array? Wang Zhen frowned. It was common knowledge that the prerequisites for an array formation were spiritual energy, array diagrams, and seals. These were the 3 basic requirements for constructing a formation as stated in the Cultivation Encyclopedia. But in fact, apart from these 3 basic conditions, the cultivation world's almighty figures actually paid more attention to the 4th condition, time. All large-scale formations paid particular attention to the necessity of timing. The 24 hours of a day were divided into 24 hours of feng shui, which was to say 2 hours were 2 hours. Feng shui changed at different times of the day. That was to say, the reason why large-scale arrays paid so much attention to timing was in fact to absorb more spirit chi of heaven and earth in the right place at the right time, so that the array could resonate with heaven and earth. The other party is pretending to seize the Heavenly Vein, but in fact doesn't need to seize it at all. He just needs to open the Heavenly Vein main valve. So, his real goal is to use the power of the Heavenly Vein to stir up feng shui and set up a huge hidden array? Loopy Toad made its own conjecture after putting all the above together. Then, based on this conjecture, there was a new problem. The other party had summoned so many dead souls and resurrected them in order to stall for time. He had painstakingly planned to pretend to seize the Heavenly Vein main valve, but in fact he was secretly plotting to open the Heavenly Vein, and didn't really want to seize it. Once the conditions were met, he would be able to obtain the spirit power needed to set up the array. Assuming that the other party already had the seals, what was the array diagram? What was an array diagram? This became a new problem. Since he wanted to break the array, he had to first understand the diagram. To set up an array diagram, he naturally had to draw a circle or an oval. But 9 Dragon Mountain's terrain was complex, and there didn't seem to be any favorable conditions for setting up an array diagram. Don't tell me it's to use these 9 peaks to circle the mountain dome? Little Silver asked. I don't think so. Wang Jin shook his head. Using the peaks of Nine Dragon Mountain and the mountain dome in the center to set up an array was too clumsy. Anyone with the slightest bit of array experience would be able to see through it. Furthermore, if it was set up like this, it wouldn't be called a large-scale array at all. Wang Jin had once heard his parents tell the story of the war between the gods in the domain of the gods. In ancient times, the most outstanding array master in the domain of the gods could set up an array around a small country. In order to revive his country, this crazy array master chose to destroy his own country first, and then came up with the idea of setting up a large-scale array. In order to set up this large-scale array, the crazy array master calculated the position and timing, and dug a tunnel deep underground day and night until he finally completed a perfect circle around the country. Then he activated the array in an attempt to sacrifice the entire population of the country. This inhumane dark array was the most notorious country blood sacrifice array in the Battle of the Gods. Once the array was formed, the souls of all the Almighties at a certain level inside the array would be sacrificed in an instant, and their bodies would turn into dust. But this large-scale array had long been restricted, and both Earth and the domain of the gods were under strict control. Wang Jin had only heard about it a few times from word of mouth since he was a child. If they're setting up such a large-scale array, Huaxiao Alliance shouldn't be completely unresponsive. Wang Jin was deeply worried. He was thinking about something. If the layout of this array formation was a little bigger? What if the setup of this giant array was not limited to just one country? What if the other party's goal from the very beginning was to use Earth as the end of the array? Chapter 1176. A terrifying idea formed in Wang Jin's mind. A super-universe-level magic array was something he had never thought of before. It was a little unbelievable, and even more so, it made his hair stand on end. Loopy Toad's fur stood on end. Are you sure the other party has already set up all the points for the array, and Earth is the last one? Wang Jin's face was solemn. It's not impossible. Earth isn't the only place with heavenly veins. If the 8 planets in the solar system plus the sun itself are moved to a particular angle, the conditions for setting up the array will be just right. Then, as long as the heavenly veins master valve on Earth is opened before that particular trajectory arrives, the array will be complete. Of course, these were just Wang Jin's speculations, and he didn't have any concrete evidence to prove it. Following Loopy Toad's aura, Wang Jin and the other two were finally approaching the center of the domed mountain peak. The patrols in this area were particularly strict, and no less than 50 to 63-man teams of the resident special forces patrolled the area. Under such a strict security mechanism, it was reasonable to say that if there were any traces of outsiders on the dome, it would definitely not escape the eyes of these resident special forces. They lived here all year round and were very familiar with the terrain here. Each of their eyesight was comparable to the eyes of an eagle. Even in the process of flying on a sword, they could quickly lock on the target at a very high altitude. In addition, they now carried incomparably sophisticated detection magic treasures on them, and it could be said that they had a panoramic view of any movement nearby. But in Wang Jin's view, this seemingly impenetrable defense actually had a fatal loophole. What if those people have already snuck in a long time ago? Wang Jin asked. You suspect that they're already inside? That's right. Wang Jin nodded. Since the person behind the scenes wants to set up such an evil super-universe level array, they must have a lot of patience. From what I know, someone once hid under a bed in a person's house for a whole week to ambush them, in order to find the right opportunity to create an alibi. In order to achieve a certain goal, these top almighties have plenty of time to wait patiently. Makes sense. Loopy Toad and Little Silver couldn't agree more. They had long since experienced the patience of a superior almighty. For example, when it came to buying limited edition crispy noodle snacks, Little Master Ling would line up very patiently. Even if there was a long queue outside the shop and it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to buy a crispy noodle snack in the end, he was still willing to wait patiently in the queue for the limited edition. Loopy Toad and Little Silver had to admit that they had never seen such patience before. Sometimes patience was the key to success. At this thought, the three of them could not help but sigh. At that moment, as they approached the heart of the mountain dome, a patrol team rushed over to stop Loopy Toad and the others. Up ahead. What are you doing? Although Loopy Toad and the others were also wearing Special Forces uniforms, some of the patrol members were still suspicious because of their unfamiliar faces. We're from the Special Operations Team. Little Silver stepped forward and took the initiative to answer. He handed over his Office of Strategic Deception badge to the captain of this patrol team. This was an ID badge specially custom-made by the Office of Strategic Deception. Before the start of the competition, Wuxia Alliance had personally disseminated it to friendly troops and explained how to identify the authenticity of the badge. The moment the captain touched the badge, he already knew that it was real. Then he saw the silver character engraved in the center of the badge, and his eyes immediately widened. "My apologies, so it's Spiritual Master Silver." The captain immediately had a reverent expression on his face. Seeing Little Silver's bare feet, he was even more convinced of Little Silver's true identity. This was because he had previously learned that this Spiritual Master Silver of the Office of Strategic Deception liked to go barefoot. "It's fine." Little Silver waved his hand and replied, "We're on grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's orders to patrol the inside of the mountain dome and check for hidden dangers. Just stick to your post, you don't need to come with us." "Got it. Please be careful." After Little Silver said this, the captain returned the ID badge with both hands and immediately let them through. When they were a little further away, Loopy Toad also had an incredulous expression on its face. "When did you become Spiritual Master Silver?" "It's all because of my peers. And with this identity, it's easier to bribe people on the road." Grenade throwing already anticipated this kind of situation, Little Silver replied. The core of the mountain dome was the heart of Nine Dragon Mountain, and also where the switch for the Heavenly Vein main valve was located. Logically speaking, such an important stronghold would usually have a special monitoring station set up. However, when Wang Zhen went deeper, he realized that there were no modern buildings on the entire mountain dome. It said that for the sake of the ecology, there aren't any modern buildings on Nine Dragon Mountain. The resident special forces have set up tents nearby, including Old Huang, who has always been stationed here, Little Silver said. "Including Old Huang, who has been stationed here all this time," said Little Silver. Before coming here, he had done his homework based on the intelligence he had obtained from the Office of Strategic Deception. "With Old Huang's status, he also lives in a tent?" Wang Zhen asked. "Old Huang is a little better. There's a natural stalactite cave on this mountain dome, and Old Huang has always lived in it to guard the Heavenly Vein main valve. Even when Wuxia Alliance summoned him, he never left, and only sent a clone to attend meetings. It said that for a very long time, Old Huang's real body never left the cave. Perhaps thousands of years had passed since then. If Wuxia Alliance hadn't recognized him as chief commander this time, I'm afraid he would still have chosen to stay in the cave," Little Silver said. "Stationed in a stalactite cave to guard the Heavenly Vein for more than 1,000 years? Wang Zhen was instantly vigilant. "Where is this cave?" He now suspected a creepy possibility. Just as Little Silver was about to lead everyone to the stalactite cave where Old Huang had lived, a strong sense of oppression suddenly descended. "Enemies are coming, be careful." Wang Zhen was instantly on guard. In front of the stalactite cave, a blindfolded warrior appeared. He wore thick warrior armor, and his entire body exuded a bloody aura of slaughter. "This person is..." Little Silver felt that this person was a little familiar, and seemed to have seen him on the list of dangerous resurrectees that Wuxia Alliance had provided. "This is Zaemin Rokuro. He's a Sun Island swordsman who uses the 7 killing techniques of ghosts and gods to kill people in 7 steps," Loopy Toad replied. Zaemin Rokuro had been one of the most famous dark network criminals back then, but had been wiped out by the peacekeeping force dispatched by Mishio Nation during a hunter operation. And most importantly, this Zaemin Rokuro seemed to have some connection to that old devil. Chapter 1177. Zaemin Rokuro's 7 kills of ghosts and gods had been famous back then. It was said that no matter what enemy he encountered, he would behead them within 7 steps. Now that they saw him again, the oppressive feeling of killing people like flies was indeed suffocating. If it wasn't for the fact that the average strength of Wang Zhen and the other 2 was above average, even if these members of the resident special forces met Zaemin Rokuro at this moment, their bodies would definitely be bound by the immense pressure, and they wouldn't be able to move at all, as if they had been petrified. Zaemin Rokuro died in a hunter operation back then, but he's still very strong. Everyone be careful. Little Silver stepped forward on his bare feet. As a holy beast, he had a powerful self-healing ability. Even if his head was severed, he could instantly restore it as long as it was immediately reattached. It was said that Zaemin Rokuro's 7 kills technique was world-shaking, but Little Silver believed that the other party definitely wouldn't be able to kill him. No matter how strong his 7 kills technique was, his self-healing ability wasn't bad. However, when Zaemin Rokuro saw Little Silver step forward barefoot, he subconsciously took a step back. He put his hand on his katana, and although he was blindfolded, his movements were still precise and elegant. I'm afraid it's not fair for you to fight 3 against 1. Unexpectedly, as a dark network criminal originally from Sun Island, Zaemin Rokuro's Mandarin was surprisingly good, and there was even a hint of a capital accent. Don't worry, we'll fight one-on-one. If I lose, we'll leave right away. Little Silver's expression was very confident. He believed that Zaemin Rokuro wasn't his match. Furthermore, Zaemin Rokuro was already on the verge of death, and shouldn't have appeared in the present world. Welcoming hell was his only way out. No, the 3 of you. It's not fair to begin with. I should be the one to choose my opponent. Zaemin Rokuro's eyes were covered with a red cloth, and his hoarse voice sounded very harsh. Little Silver didn't understand why Zaemin Rokuro refused to challenge him, so he sighed. Then tell me, who will you choose? Zaemin Rokuro lowered his head, and a few drops of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. In fact, his 7 kills technique of ghosts and gods wasn't a sword technique, but an ability to sense and calculate. He was able to measure the combat strength of the other party and calculate how many strikes the other party would have to endure before he could completely kill them. In fact, he was not blind. The reason why he chose to cover his eyes was to improve his perception and avoid being affected by visual disturbances. High-level swordsmen could only rely on their hearing to fight with others. This was because when they closed their eyes and lost their sight, their energy would become more focused, and the accuracy and explosive power of their swords would also improve along with the improvement of their spiritual power. Zaemin Rokuro had used the famous 7 killing arts of ghosts and gods to predict many enemies, and he deliberately chose those who he predicted would be killed within 7 strikes to create a terrifying atmosphere of killing people with 7 strikes. If he couldn't kill the enemy within 7 strikes, Zaemin Rokuro would subconsciously choose to avoid the battle. His reputation was still very important. He had said that he would need 7 sure kill swords, so he had to have 7 sure kill swords. Even one more would have a huge impact on his character. Even though Zaemin Rokuro was resurrected by the person behind the scenes after his death, as a dead person, he still paid attention to his character. He had said that he would kill someone in 7 moves, not 1 more. Thus, when Zaemin Rokuro had received the order from the person behind the scenes to stand guard at the mouth of the stalactite cave, he had been thinking about how to shock the world with his 7 killing arts of ghosts and gods. He had been thinking about a grand plan to revive the country when Little Silver, Wang Zhen and Loopy Toad had come knocking on his door. Zaemin Rokuro took a deep breath and stroked his katana. He realized that his opportunity had come. However, when Little Silver stepped forward to fight him, a number instantly flashed through Zaemin Rokuro's mind. +823192391 strikes, Zaemin Rokuro? He actually had to slash out more than 800 million times in a row before he could kill the young man in front of him? Where on earth did this young man come from? More than 800 million strikes was an impossible task. Even if the other party stood motionless in front of him and let him slash at him, he wouldn't be able to finish it in a short time. This was too far from his goal of killing someone with 7 strikes. Zaemin Rokuro even suspected that there might be something wrong with his prediction. So he raised an objection. He asked for someone else to fight him. Then he turned his gaze to Wang Zhen. In the end, the number that flashed through Wang Zhen's mind was even longer than Little Silver's. He would need to slash out more than 1 billion times in order to kill Wang Zhen. Zaemin Rokuro took a deep breath. He now suspected that there was something seriously wrong with his brain. Logically speaking, he already wasn't weak. At the very least, he was more than a match for these Special Forces members outside. But the numbers shown in both predictions were extremely abnormal. Zaemin Rokuro couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. Then he pinned his last hope on a young man with a head full of green hair. In the end, Loopy Toad also showed a lot of numbers. Although it also showed that it would take more than 700 million strikes to kill Loopy Toad, Zaemin Rokuro was already certain that Loopy Toad was the weakest of the 3. Furthermore, there had to be something wrong with his Ghost God 7 kills technique. Zaemin Rokuro suspected that he had been dead for too long and had forgotten to add a decimal point to the Ghost God 7 kills technique, which was why the numbers in front of him were so frightening. The main thing was that these 3 people looked ordinary and didn't give off the slightest bit of aura. They didn't look like very powerful opponents. Zaemin Rokuro was even more certain that his prediction had been wrong. If it was a problem of the decimal point not being added, then of the 3 people in front of him, only Loopy Toad had 700 million strikes, plus the decimal point minus the 100 million, it was only 7 strikes. Thus, with this psychological comfort, Zaemin Rokuro heaved a sigh of relief. He swiftly put his hand on his katana and strode forward, nimbly sidestepping to stab at Loopy Toad with his sword. Loopy Toad hadn't expected Zaemin Rokuro to directly choose it as his opponent. But it had long been on guard. With this strike, Zaemin Rokuro moved 3 steps in total. That was to say, if he moved 4 more steps he would be fatally wounded. All of a sudden, Loopy Toad actually felt a little excited. It seemed that it had been a very long time since it had been injured since it had become a dog. Furthermore, as it gradually got used to the comfortable life on Earth, it felt nostalgic for those years when it had fought with the demon race. Fighting Zaemin Rokuro now made Loopy Toad instantly recall things from a long time ago. In its days, Zaemin Rokuro had already moved to the 7th step. "Brother dog, watch out." As soon as Wang Zhen's voice fell, Zaemin Rokuro's katana ruthlessly chopped down at Loopy Toad's dog head. The next moment, bang! Something broke on the spot, but it wasn't Loopy Toad's head that broke. It was Zaemin Rokuro's katana. Instead, it was Zaemin Rokuro's katana. Chapter 1178. Zaemin Rokuro was extremely confident in this slash. His samurai sword was called Ghost Steel, which was made of abyss cold iron from the Howling Abyss, and was indestructible. If his 7 kills technique had really misjudged, he could have definitely cut off Loopy Toad's head. But as it turned out, he had made an obvious mistake in his prediction. The power of this slash wasn't of much use to Loopy Toad. It didn't even feel the slightest bit of pain. Its green hair fluttered in the wind as the sword chi cut through the air. This was the first time Zaemin Rokuro had faced this kind of situation. In a situation where their strengths weren't equal, Zaemin Rokuro's chances of winning were slim to none. Now that Wang Zhen and the other 2 had the power of Shadow Dao, this slash naturally couldn't cause them any harm. Not only that, Zaemin Rokuro had to pay with his Ghost Steel sword. My Ghost Steel. My incomparably sharp sword that can cut through iron like mud, with a sharp head and a hilt that I can give to my girlfriend. Zaemin Rokuro cried his heart out when the Ghost Steel sword was cut in half. The Ghost Steel sword had been with him for many years, and the first thing he had done after his resurrection was to retrieve it. But what Zaemin Rokuro hadn't expected was that before the Ghost Steel sword in his hand had completely warmed up, it had actually been cut in half by his misjudgment. When the sword was broken, the spiritual link with its owner was instantly severed. Zaemin Rokuro instantly felt like his heart was being cut by a knife, and he couldn't help coughing up a mouthful of blood. The pain of the backlash was far worse than he had imagined. It was a kind of pain that stemmed from the soul. When the pain started, you wouldn't even be able to find any wounds. You would only feel the chi and blood in your body churn and you would have a splitting headache. "There's no way you can beat my master." After saying that, Zaemin Rokuro stabbed the remaining half of the Ghost Steel sword into his abdomen. After confirming his death, his body fell apart and turned into a puddle of black light particles that drifted away in the wind. Had he actually chosen suicide? Wang Zhen pinched his chin as he pondered what had happened. Logically speaking, a powerful swordsman like Zaemin Rokuro, who was an extremely high-ranking Dark Network wanted swordsman, would never choose suicide because of the pain of the backlash. To be able to reach such a high ranking, his cultivation experience and combat experience were second to none, and he wouldn't choose suicide to lessen the pain. Thus, he immediately thought of another possibility. In an independent mental space, Wang Zhen, Little Silver and Loopy Toad established a face-to-face telepathy channel. In this completely isolated mental space, no one else could hear their conversation. He faked his death. Wang Zhen quickly came to a conclusion. He didn't use any spells or techniques, nor did he use his eye power. Instead, he relied entirely on his own experience to judge. "Why are you so sure?" asked Loopy Toad. As someone who had once played dead in front of Wang Ling, Loopy Toad was especially sensitive to the term fake death. Pretending to be dead and then taking the opportunity to escape was a profound skill and knowledge. In the cultivation world, faking death together with a variety of spells can be used to play with flowers. Loopy Toad had seen a spell specially developed for faking one's death, and it was called the Split into Pieces spell. In the process of using this technique, the body could be split into countless pieces of different sizes, and finally be reconnected using a jigsaw puzzle technique. This was a very profound technique for faking one's death. Of course, the proficiency required was also very high. Usually, one would need to practice at home until the corresponding proficiency was reached before they could use it normally. Because if they weren't proficient, they could spell the wrong parts. And once they did, they could only wait until they had accumulated enough spirit energy to cast the spell again. There was once a male cultivator who had turned into a small elephant man because he had misspelled parts of his body. If you wanted to use this spell in battle, if you weren't proficient enough, it was very likely that the enemy would see through it because of the uneven splits, and it was very likely that you would be whipped to destroy the integrity of the pieces. I know of a curse-type faking death spell which can be achieved by harming yourself. These people used the method of suicide to add their remaining soul power to a specific person. And this specific person must be a blood relative. Loopy Toad, that's to say Zaemin Rokuro has brothers? Little Silver nodded. According to intelligence, Zaemin Rokuro does indeed have brothers, and all three of them are very strong sword cultivators. Unfortunately, Zaemin Rokuro's halo was too big back then, which caused the other two brothers to be buried. There's such a thing? He has two brothers? One is called Zaemin Rokuro, the other is Zaemin Rokuro. It could only be said that Wang Zhen was in the end Wang Zhen. As someone from the domain of the gods, he could tell at a glance that this was a faking death spell. Sure enough, before they could step into the stalactite, a middle-aged man who looked exactly like Zaemin Rokuro walked out of the cave, wearing the same attire as Zaemin Rokuro. The only difference was that the sword in his hand was clearly different from the dark steel sword that Zaemin Rokuro had taken out. Although there wasn't much difference in appearance, it was clear that Zaemin Rokuro's sword had an evil power attached to it. It seems that the brothers have imbued the spirit sword with the power of the curse. Wang Zhen took a deep breath. Since he had already confirmed that Zaemin Rokuro had two other brothers, it was likely that this situation had been planned in advance. Whether it was Zaemin Rokuro or Zaemin Rokuro in front of him, they weren't afraid of being angry. Instead, after they died, they could better imbue their other brothers with the power of their souls. So to deal with these three brothers, using normal means to kill them would instead make them stronger. I'll do it. This time Wang Zhen decided to do it himself. On one hand, he wanted to see how strong his power of Shadow Dao was. Right now, he still lacked a certain amount of practical experience, and the three Zaemin brothers were undoubtedly the best targets for practice. Tide Man. In the next moment, Wang Zhen stepped forward and called out the name of his Shadow Dao shadow image. When his shadow was activated from the ground, the muscular man who was tied up with ropes rose from the ground like a towering mountain. Zaemin Rokuro's heart trembled. He didn't have the power of Shadow Dao, and didn't know what was happening in front of him. In the next moment, Zaemin Rokuro felt his whole body tighten as an inexplicable force actually bound him. This force was like a rope wrapped around him in layers. This was the love is stronger than gold rope. As long as Wang Zhen's shadow image was within its attack range, it was a powerful control spell. You three brothers, where's the third person? At that moment, Wang Zhen stared at Zaemin Rokuro. He could actually use the power of shadow image better than he had imagined. As expected of Ling Jinren's little sister's power, these brother and sister were both geniuses. Chapter 1179. It was Monday, November 17th, the third day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition. At dawn on Fire Peak, when the first rays of the sun shone on Wang Ling's face, it perfectly outlined the contours of his handsome profile. Although Wang Ling had already tried his best to reshape his face so that his looks were average, a person's temperament wouldn't change because of this. Wang Ling turned his gaze to Round Peak as he observed the movements of Wang Zhen, Little Silver and Loopy Toad's three-person team. Judging from their battle strength, Wang Ling felt that with Shadow Dao activated, the three of them wouldn't be at a disadvantage. But Wang Ling had a bad feeling about this. A large part of the reason why he had chosen to have Wang Zhen act on his behalf to draw out the person behind the scenes was because he couldn't sense his aura. This was something that had never happened before. Wang Ling didn't think that there was anything wrong with him, as he still had terrifying and uncontrollable power. However, this unknown person behind the scenes had a strange origin that Wang Ling had never heard of before. But for Wang Ling, this wasn't the only trouble in front of him. Early in the morning, Wang Ling stood on the cliff and observed Wang Zhen's movements. This action immediately sparked a discussion among number 60 High's Wang Ling concern group and his fan club. What's Wang Ling thinking? He looks uneasy. As a good brother, Hero Guo was actually very concerned about Wang Ling's movements. To be honest, this was the first time he had seen Wang Ling so anxious. This guy is usually very calm during exams. I've never seen him look like this before. Super Chin thought of how Wang Ling had always been calm and composed when he did the questions and got an average score in the past. Whether it was the big and small tests or the monthly exam, Wang Ling's expression had never changed. Even though they had been through so many activities, Wang Ling was still the calmest of them all. Maybe he's feeling anxious because the competition is too long? Hero Guo rubbed his chin, feeling that he didn't quite understand what was going on. It's possible. Super Chin nodded. It's not like he's worried about saving the world, It's not that easy to be a hero these days. Wang Ling, as an expressionless man who almost never showed anxiety on his face, Wang Ling never thought that his anxiety would be so obvious. Because he was used to facial paralysis, even if a slight expression occasionally appeared on his face, it would still be a stark contrast in the eyes of outsiders. What should he do when the mascot becomes anxious? What Wang Ling faced next was naturally the group of people sending him warmth. The first to arrive were Super Chen and Hero Gua. These two good brothers each put their arms around Wang Ling's shoulders. Hero Gua, Wang Ling, I think you shouldn't work today and just rest well in the tent. I think there's something wrong with your mental state. There are still a few days left. You're our mascot, so you can't collapse. Super Chen nodded in agreement with Hero Gua's view. How about this, Wang Ling? You're part of the talisman maker team to begin with, so I'll draw the talismans for you today and tomorrow. Don't worry about anything else, just lie down. Also, do you need a massage? The martial arts massage technique I learned from my father is pretty good. It can relax both the mind and the muscles. Wang Ling was caught off guard by the sudden enthusiasm, and felt that he had underestimated the power of Xia Ming's fan club. Xia Ming had previously viewed Wang Ling as a love rival, but after being taken in by Wang Ling's charisma, he had instantly become the president of the fan club. As the president, Xia Ming naturally came to personally express his concern for Wang Ling. Student Wang Ling, are you feeling unwell? I've already asked student Lotus Sun to refine a Dahuan pill with the pill-making machine. It said that it can nourish the yin and kidney and can regulate your breathing. You can eat one and stay up all night. The most important thing is that it can also strengthen your body and improve your immune system, and effectively kill that troublesome coronavirus. After Xia Ming's concern was over, the girls in number 60 High's camp weren't idle either. Li Yuyue was preparing a luxurious, nutritious breakfast. This food was made from local ingredients, mostly spirit fruits and spirit plants. Li Yuyue used her exquisite cooking skills to make fruit soup and vegetable rolls, which were both nutritious and hygienic. Of course, there were also a few boys who suggested eating meat. However, eating wild game was actually not recommended nowadays. In addition, many of the spirit beasts on Nine Dragon Mountain were protective spirit beasts. Otherwise, it was not recommended to kill just to satisfy one's appetite. After all, there were plenty of things that could be used to supplement nutrition. In response to the boys' suggestion of eating meat, Li Yuyue also tried to use her own methods to send people to gather some spirit beans. Relying on bean products to make artificial meat, it could just barely be considered a meat dish that wasn't meat. Of course, in order to show concern for Wang Ling, Li Yuyue specially used spirit beans to make crispy noodle snacks. They were fried on the spot and fresh from the oven. They could be eaten directly after being crushed and seasoned. These seasonings were naturally gathered, and could be used after being ground into powder and mixed. Wang Ling never thought that Li Yuyue would actually be so dexterous that she could even make crispy noodle snacks in the wild. For a moment, Wang Ling actually felt his anxiety ease a lot, until the next moment Lotus Sun found him. Student Wang Ling, they said that your mental state isn't very stable. Are you sick? Lotus Sun stepped forward and touched Wang Ling's forehead to confirm that he didn't have a fever. The flu had been prevalent these days, and it would definitely be troublesome if he really did fall ill with a fever in the wild. Fortunately, however, she was about to refine the Dahuan pill. It wasn't too difficult to use the pill-making machine that her family had specially built. Student Lotus Sun, did you see anything? At that moment, Lu Qingyi stepped forward and asked. She actually knew that Wang Ling was completely fine. This was Ling Zhenren. How could there be a problem? But the reason why Lu Qingyi had chosen to make a move at that moment was actually to return Lotus Sun's favor from last night, so she decided to come out and assist. Tell me, is it because the boys' tents are too messy? Our girls' tents have so many of them. Maybe someone infected Wang Ling. I think Nanishio coughed a lot last night. Cough. The corners of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. Nanishio hadn't coughed a lot. That was because he had been a lookout for some boys who had been peeking at the girls, but it was said that because it was too dark, they hadn't seen anything. Wang Ling had thought that Lu Qingyi had come out to save him, but in the end he was stunned to realize that the other party had completely sold him out. When Lotus Sun heard Lu Qingyi's words, she actually felt that they made a lot of sense. She looked at Wang Ling and asked with a flushed face, Student Wang Ling, do you want to sleep with us tonight? With us tonight? At that moment, Wang Ling's mind was completely blank. In the face of everyone's sincere concern, Wang Ling absent-mindedly realized, perhaps, this was the real crisis. And so, instead of easing his anxiety, Wang Ling felt that he was even more anxious. Sleep together? Lu Qingyi shrieked in alarm. She had just assisted, but hadn't expected Lotus Sun to actually be so bold. Lotus Sun's face was completely red as she stamped her foot anxiously. I just wanted to say, do you want to switch tents with us? Chapter 1180. Everyone's concern made Wang Ling feel uncomfortable, and the strength of Xia Ming's fan club was also beyond his expectations. Wang Ling never thought that he would really become everyone's favorite mascot, and one that looked very weak and needed to be protected at all times. As the leader of Wang Ling's fan club, student Xia Ming took on the responsibility of interviewing everyone as to why Wang Ling had become so popular in such a short period of time. Why do you think classmate Wang Ling needs protection? Xia Ming randomly conducted interviews in the camp. The data from this interview would allow him to better fulfill his role as leader. Nan Ishio, who was the first to be questioned, had a surprised expression on his face. If the mascot doesn't need to be protected like a vase, don't tell me you want the mascot to be the vanguard? Nan Ishio had only decided to join the fan club after Wang Ling had brought Wang Zhen back. As far as he knew, Wang Ling was the weakest person in the whole of number 60 high school, which was why he was the school mascot. But after Wang Zhen went missing, this weakest mascot had actually gone out to look for him and even brought him back. This made Nan Ishio, the captain of South Sea Sky High, feel too ashamed to show his face. After careful consideration, Nan Ishio excitedly grabbed Xia Ming's hand and said, "As a mascot, classmate Wang Ling is really very courageous." Courageous. Xia Ming really agreed with this point. When he and Wang Ling had been at loggerheads back then, he had challenged Wang Ling in front of so many people for Lotus Sun. In the end, not only had Wang Ling not backed down, he had even taken the initiative to accept the challenge after school. He was indeed a very courageous person. Apart from Nan Ishio, the others also gave their own answers to the question of why Wang Ling needed protection. Xia Ming, as Wang Ling's closest classmates, why did you join the fan club? Super Chin, Wang Ling. The main reason I joined the fan club was because you promised to copy my homework every day after school started. Xia Ming, can you not be so honest? Super Chin sighed helplessly. I had no choice. When I copied Wang Ling's homework before, he always got half of it wrong. What could I do? Out of 10 questions he got 4 wrong and passed every time with a passing score. I don't know how Wang Ling did it. On the side, Hirogwa had a deep understanding of Super Chen's reply. Whether it was exams or homework, Wang Ling was amazing. For example, Hirogwa really couldn't figure out why Wang Ling was able to push the line so accurately every time he took an exam. This was not something an ordinary person could do. So, you joined the fan club just to copy homework? Xia Ming felt that this kind of opportunistic behavior was shameless. What followed was what the girls thought of Wang Ling, which was what Xia Ming was most concerned about. Classmate Lotus Sun, why do you think classmate Wang Ling inspires such a strong desire to protect others? Among the girls, the first person Xia Ming asked was Lotus Sunday. As his and Wang Ling's mutual target back then, Xia Ming was very concerned about her true thoughts. Faced with the interview, Lotus Sun's expression was especially relaxed. I just think classmate Wang Ling is very cute. Xia Ming instantly felt like he had been dealt a critical blow. Cute? Was that a word used to describe a man? Xia Ming suddenly felt a little sour. This wasn't just an era of scientific cultivation, but also an era of rampant lemon people. Their army of lemon people would use all kinds of bottom-line methods to attack you and make all kinds of sarcasm. Xia Ming really wanted to ask, wasn't he cute? But in the face of certain defeat, Xia Ming felt that he didn't have the slightest chance of winning, because even from a boy's point of view, he had to admit that Wang Ling was indeed a little interesting. But as a boy with a normal orientation, Xia Ming didn't have any superfluous thoughts about Wang Ling. He now only had admiration for him. Classmate Wang Ling is certainly cute, but is everyone so protective of him just because he's cute? As the leader of the fan club, Xia Ming hoped to dig deeper. Compared with Wang Ling's cuteness, he actually admired Wang Ling's charisma more. Lotus Sun, isn't being cute enough? There are so few cute boys nowadays. Look at classmate Wang Ling's dead fish eyes, they're round and cute. And look at your double eyelids. Every time I see them, I think you're still sleepy. Xia Ming? At that moment, Li Yue on the side also chimed in. Also, have you noticed that classmate Wang Ling is especially keen on crispy noodle snacks? Based on our family's many years of experience with food, being keen on one kind of snack means that he's more single-minded, and is usually the ideal boyfriend type. Furthermore, you can draw cards in a snack like crispy noodle snacks. If a man is so interested in the lottery, it means that he's saving money. Also, Crispy Noodle Snack's lottery is mostly for collecting cards, which symbolizes a kind of persistent spirit. If he wins the lottery, it also means that he's lucky. When all was said and done, Li Yuiwei and Lotus Sun high-fived each other and said almost in unison, "Nowadays, who doesn't want to have a cute, single-minded, persistent and lucky boyfriend?" At this point in the interview, Xia Ming felt like he had suffered a 10,000-ton blow, F***K. He couldn't do this interview anymore. On the other side, Wang Zhen and the others had already entered the stalactite cave without a hitch. Wang Zhen's binding man tied up Chimin Qilong tightly because Chimin Qilong was already under control. Their third brother, Chimin Qilong, wasn't affected by the power of the curse. "I will never betray my brother. Even if you torture me, I won't say a word." Because of Wang Zhen's shadow binding man, the possibility of Chimin Qilong committing suicide to perpetuate the curse was eliminated. Chimin Qilong wasn't afraid of death, because he was well aware that his death would make his third brother stronger. "It doesn't matter if you don't want to say it, we weren't aiming at you in the first place." Wang Zhen smiled. He had already seen who knew how many times in the domain of the gods, and Chimin Qilong's method was completely inadequate. The combined strength of these three brothers was just an appetizer. Wang Zhen was looking forward to a real battle. As a fighting race from the domain of the gods, if a battle couldn't threaten their lives at all, then what was the point? Chapter 1181. The red stalactite cave that old Huang guarded was divided into 5 areas. After getting rid of the Menshir brothers, Wang Zhen, Little Silver and Loopy Toad entered the inner stalactite cave without a hitch. The cave was very humid, and water constantly dripped down from the stone pillars above. The water droplets exploded on Loopy Toad's head of green hair, and icy cold air seeped into its body, making its hair stand on end. This stalactite cave had been around for thousands of years. Stalactites were everywhere inside, and they exuded an immortal aura. Some hung upside down like jade dragon teeth from the top to the ground, while others hung in the air like clouds and rain, creating surging white waves that couldn't help marveling at them. Although this place was beautiful, it couldn't be lived in for long. The cold air of a 1,000-year-old stalactite cave would fill a person with yin qi. Unless they used an extreme yang technique to help them, they would definitely get all kinds of rheumatic diseases in the long run. I saw old Huang from afar before, and he definitely doesn't cultivate an extreme yang technique. Deep in the stalactite cave, Wang Zhen's suspicions about old Huang deepened. Wang Zhen had once been fortunate enough to see a so-called extreme yang technique that could channel the power of the sun into the body in the form of qigong, and finally perfectly fuse the sun with spirit qi for free manipulation. When the cultivation method was activated, it combined the power of the sun, spiritual energy, and blood energy. The 3 different kinds of energy would be tightly entwined together like a fried dough twist. When the last punch broke out, the fist would emit a dazzling light like the sun. This technique was called sun wave, and Wang Zhen had only seen it once in his lifetime. The boxing master who had comprehended this technique was in the domain of the gods. His name was Apollo, and he was a fair, strong man who was pitch black all over and liked to smear olive oil all over his body. After cultivating sun wave, his entire body shone with golden light, and he exuded a golden aura. But there was currently no war in the domain of the gods. Although Apollo was indeed very strong after cultivating sun wave, he had now become a traffic policeman on night duty in the domain of the gods, responsible for maintaining order in the domain of the gods at night. Are there no more high-end jobs in the domain of the gods? Yes. Apollo also works part-time as a rechargeable battery holder. I'll introduce you to him when I get the chance. Back to the main topic, Wang Zhen's question was about old Huang's true identity. It was unrealistic to live in such a place of extreme yin for a long time without an extreme yang cultivation technique. Little Silver and Loopy Toad both had incredulous expressions on their faces when they heard this news in the chat channel. Are you saying that the elder Huang in the command center is fake? It's just a guess because I don't have any concrete evidence. Since the other party was able to put on such a perfect disguise and even deceive President Qi, one of the 10 generals, he definitely has his own unique methods. Wang Zhen felt that the situation behind the scenes wasn't that simple. There had to be some secret that few people knew about. He knew that old Huang was President Qi's Shifu. Master and disciple knew each other very well. If this was a fake old Huang, given President Qi's abilities, there was no way he wouldn't have sensed it. The deeper Wang Zhen investigated this matter, the more he felt that there was something strange and sinister about the whole thing. A mysterious person behind the scenes who had yet to show his face, and a fake old Huang whom even President Qi, his own disciple, couldn't verify. How many more tricks did he have up his sleeves? After probing the entire stalactite cave with his perception ability, Wang Jin abruptly felt a huge shock to his mind. In the fourth and fifth sections of the stalactite cave, he could clearly sense that his perception was blocked by a mysterious and unfathomable force. His spiritual see instantly fell into a pitch-black darkness, and for a moment he couldn't see anything. I never thought you would actually be able to make it here. I told you that the three brothers were trash, but my lord didn't believe me. A familiar voice rang out in the darkness. It was a feminine woman's voice, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in it. Loopy Toad controlled its dog fur, and its green hair burst forth with a brilliant green light that instantly illuminated the area in front of it. This was a new ability it had obtained after evolving into a human form. It could turn up the brightness of its fluorescent dog fur in its dog form and project it this way. Little Silver was very shocked by this new ability, because it was his first time seeing it. Since when did a super champion have green hair? Loopy Toad, after I evolved into a human form, I've been gradually developing my new abilities, and there are still a lot of things you don't know. So don't be too surprised, these are all basic abilities. Little Silver and Wang Zhen. Under the illumination of Loopy Toad's green light, everyone could finally clearly see the appearance of the person in the darkness. It was a well-proportioned woman with long, elegant hair, slender eyes and a straight nose. She wore a black and red corset and had thick makeup on her face. When Loopy Toad saw this person for the first time, it felt that she looked a little familiar. But when its gaze shifted to the woman's chest, it couldn't take its eyes off her. This is 36D. The reason why it was so familiar with this size wasn't because Loopy Toad had started to develop an interest in human women. The main reason was that it had an indissoluble bond with this 36D, Shadow Stream. Loopy Toad stared at the woman in front of it and made its own guess. At the same time, its eyes were extremely vigilant. The master of Shadow Stream had probably already been captured and was being held on high alert by Warden Liang in Songhai First Prison. Logically speaking, it was impossible for her to appear here. Furthermore, this pair of Shadow Stream sisters had a criminal record of breaking out of prison, so Liang Yuzhang had already raised their level of imprisonment to the highest level for crimes. It was second only to the Mahjong trio. That's right, I'm Shadow Stream. But what surprised Loopy Toad was that the woman in front of it actually admitted her identity very quickly. She grinned sinisterly. After I woke up, I knew that Shadow Stream had already disappeared. As expected, those two sisters were good for nothings. The foundation I left behind was smashed to smithereens. Shadow Stream was supposed to be the most powerful killer organization in the world. Who would have thought that in the end, it would be defeated by my two disciples? Jiang Luiying, Jiang Luiyue, they're both your disciples. Loopy Toad suddenly understood, and felt that all the clues had instantly become clear. Does all this still matter? The woman smiled. The Shadow Stream of the past no longer exists. Now it's a brand new beginning. She took a step forward and then took out a sharp dagger from the side of her slender thigh. I'm not the master of Shadow Stream, but the ancestor of Shadow Stream. The legendary third epic level killer on the list of killers. Chapter 1182. The legendary third epic level killer. The founder of Shadow Stream, Jiang Yingyu. Another nickname in the world of killers, Shadow Stream Progenitor. In terms of battle strength, Jiang Yingyu had been neck and neck with gorgeous itinerant and Taoist Tao Tai at her peak. But the three of them hadn't had the same Shifu. It was just that Loopy Toad hadn't expected Shadow Stream Progenitor Jiang Yingyu, who was said to have retired from the world of martial arts, to actually be dead. If she hadn't come back to life this time, Jiang Yingyu's disappearance would probably still be an unsolved mystery in the world of killers. But Loopy Toad was deeply curious about how Jiang Luiyue had died. Wang Zhen and Little Silver weren't interested in Jiang Luiyue's identity, but Loopy Toad and Shadow Stream could be considered ill-fated. Naturally, I failed in my challenge against Numinous Mother. Jiang Yingyu said lightly, as if losing to Numinous Mother was nothing out of the ordinary. You've met Numinous Mother? Loopy Toad was blank. Of course I've met her and we even fought. Although I lost miserably, I died in the end from my injuries. But my fight with her that time, it's still vivid in my mind. Jiang Yingyu said, now that I have a chance to start over, if I see her again, I'll definitely take away her title as the progenitor of the world of killers with my own hands. Not only have you seen her, but you've also fought her. Loopy Toad was even more astonished, because it was one of the few people who knew Numinous Mother's true identity. Mother Wang was a housewife through and through. If she had run into a lunatic like Jiang Yingyu on the road, how could she have fought back? Loopy Toad felt that there was something fishy about this. Although Mother Wang was the genuine numinous mother, her identity had been formed by all kinds of freak accidents and coincidences. In fact, over the years, even Mother Wang herself had almost forgotten that she had once used the pen name Numinous Mother. She didn't even know that she had trained 2 members with the help of a lost outline. Epic level killer? I've also met Numinous Mother. At that moment, Loopy Toad raised its head. It was very patient and wasn't in a hurry to make a move. It just wanted to test whether the person Jiang Yingyue had seen was Mother Wang. She's the most special woman I've ever met. She's elegant, intellectual, and loves life. She's definitely the model of a good wife and mother. Jiang Yingyu didn't feel the slightest bit regretful about losing to the numinous mother. Sometimes, when one's skills were inferior to others, there was nothing to complain about. Loopy Toad listened to Jiang Yingyue's adjectives, and at first glance, it felt that they were indeed describing Mother Wang. When she had still been using the pen name Numinous Mother, Mother Wang had indeed been an intellectual and elegant female writer. After giving birth to Wang Ling, she had stopped writing and become a virtuous wife and loving mother. As Loopy Toad listened to Jiang Yingyue's description, it felt its impression of Mother Wang start to blur. Was Nurse Wang really a big shot? For a moment, Loopy Toad felt like its entire being was a mess. It had lived in the Wang family's small villa for so many days, and had never noticed anything unusual about Mother Wang. She really was just a well-behaved housewife. But looking at Jiang Yingyue's situation, there were indeed signs that the 2 of them had fought before. Jiang Yingyue looked Loopy Toad up and down. The first thing she had done after her resurrection had been to find out about Shadow Stream's development in recent years. In the end, she had learned from the news that Shadow Stream's attack on number 60 High had failed, and the entire organization had been wiped out. In the span of a month, the organization she had painstakingly planned had fallen apart in an instant. Jiang Yingyue's heart instantly broke down. After investigating, Jiang Yingyue realized that the key reason for Shadow Stream's failure was that it had been too indecisive, as well as a lack of combat experience. Thus, Jiang Yingyue had specially formulated a new plan. Was called. She had meticulously drawn up a grand blueprint for Shadow Stream's future development, and had sorted out the targets for revenge. And Loopy Toad was impressively on Jiang Yingyue's list of revenge targets. I remember there was a green-furred dog in my revenge plan. At that moment, Jiang Yingyue turned her gaze to Loopy Toad. Her slender eyes narrowed into slits, and there was a hint of craftiness in them. It could only be said that the progenitor of Shadow Stream was in the end the progenitor of Shadow Stream. Even though Loopy Toad had already successfully cultivated a human form, she could still tell at a glance that its true form was in fact a green-furred Akita. There were a lot of Akitas who had awakened spiritual intelligence these days, but how many of them were green-furred? Jiang Yingyue was almost instantly able to discern Loopy Toad's true identity. She didn't use any eye power or magic treasure to identify it, but purely relied on her combat experience as the progenitor of Shadow Stream. She wasn't weaker than gorgeous itinerant or Taoist Tao Tai to begin with. But Jiang Yingyue still felt that Loopy Toad's appearance was a little inconceivable. I didn't find you. You actually saw Numinous Mother, and you actually survived? Before our duel, Numinous Mother signed a life and death contract with me. If we unfortunately died during the fight, no one was allowed to make trouble for the other. She told me that anyone who had seen her true form would definitely die. After saying this, Jiang Yingyue looked at Loopy Toad with an even stranger expression. You actually saw Numinous Mother and survived? Loopy Toad. He wasn't. He hadn't. During the time he had been living in the Wang family's small villa, he and Mother Wang had been seeing each other every day. Mother Wang hadn't said that she would kill him just because he had seen her true form. At that moment, Loopy Toad truly felt that there might be some kind of deep misunderstanding here. It was clear that this kind of misunderstanding couldn't be cleared up in a short time. Jiang Yingyue had lost to Numinous Mother back then, and after her resurrection her greatest hope had been to sum up her experience from her previous defeat and fight Numinous Mother again. But now, in Jiang Yingyue's view, this wish could no longer be fully realized. The Numinous Mother said that anyone who saw her must die. This dog had seen the Numinous Mother, yet survived. Did that mean that this green-furred dog had killed Numinous Mother? After sorting out her thoughts, Jiang Yingyue stared at Loopy Toad again, and at the same time, there was a gloomy look on her face. You killed Numinous Mother? Loopy Toad, ? Jiang Yingyue, since you killed Numinous Mother, that means that you're stronger than her. As long as this venerable one kills you, this venerable one will be able to prove that this venerable one is the ancestor of the world's #1 assassins. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Loopy Toad hurriedly tried to dissuade her. It wasn't that it was afraid, it just felt that things weren't completely clear yet. But how could Jiang Inoue be willing to give it the chance? In the next moment, the woman in front of it formed a magic seal with her hands, and her entire body split into dozens of shadows which surrounded Loopy Toad. Multiple clone technique. Loopy Toad's eyes suddenly turned vigilant. This woman wasn't joking, she was serious. Chapter 1183. The multiple clones spell instantly isolated the battlefield, separating Little Silver and Wang Zhen. In an instant, smoke filled the air. Jiang Yingyu was more cunning than expected. This wasn't a simple clone spell, but a self-destruction clone spell. Once the clones were subjected to external force, they would immediately explode. The explosion of one shadow clone was equivalent to 10 C4 bombs. If so many shadow clones exploded at the same time, anyone under the soul formation stage would definitely be seriously injured if they didn't have enough protection at such a close range. The range of such a bomb was very wide. The entire stalactite cave would be razed to the ground, and everything within 5 kilometers would be affected. Although Wang Zhen and Little Silver didn't think that such a bomb would be fatal to them, it would definitely have a huge impact on the ecology of Nine Dragon Mountain once it exploded. And most importantly, this stalactite cave was very close to the heavenly valve. The consequences of the explosion were unimaginable. With the heavenly valve nearby, Wang Zhen thought that the other party wouldn't be so serious, but it turned out that Jiang Yingyu's madness wasn't any less than that of the 3 Menshir brothers at the entrance. She didn't care about the heavenly valve at all, and instead focused all her attention on the battle in front of her. The main purpose of the person behind the scenes resurrecting so many people was to stall for time. Thus, in Wang Zhen's eyes, the outcome of this battle was meaningless. However, this was an unavoidable battle. If they couldn't get rid of Jiang Yingyu, they wouldn't be able to advance any further. As the 3rd killer on the epic level killer list, Jiang Yingyu was most familiar with the ability, Explosion. The so-called explosion was an art, and the lethality of a close-range explosion was self-evident. As an expert in explosion techniques, Jiang Yingyu was especially confident in her abilities. Especially after she successfully activated the Shadow Dao, she had the ability to plant bombs through her shadow. Heavenly Shadow Explosion Maiden. This was the name of her shadow image. The person who resurrected me gave me great power. My shadow image can plant bombs in any shadow it touches. What do you think your chances of winning against me are? Jiang Yingyu smiled slyly. She was confident that she wouldn't be unable to take care of a green-furred dog with her current strength. The power of her shadow image gave her a lot of confidence. This was a power that Jiang Yingyu had never seen before, but it could multiply her comprehensive strength in a short period of time. If she had this ability back then and Numinous Mother encountered her, the result would be 100% that she would be blown to death by her. But now, the Numinous Mother had already been killed by this green-furred dog in front of her. So, as long as she killed this dog, she could still prove her position as the ancestor of the assassin world. Thinking of this, Jiang Yingyu's eyes gradually became excited. Her shadow image was that of a scholarly young girl wearing a dazzling purple Lolita dress. At the same time, she was holding an umbrella with a time scale on it. This was the true form of the Shadow Explosion Goddess. As long as one was covered by the umbrella in her hand, the shadow would immediately become a time bomb. This was a very tricky shadow image ability. At least in Loopy Toad's view, it was far more powerful than the 3 Menshir brothers guarding the door. With my Shadow Explosion Goddess here, you have no chance of winning at all. Jiang Inoue raised her hand and started to manipulate Shadow Explosion Goddess to capture Loopy Toad's shadow image. Loopy Toad's figure could only jump around as they clashed, and for a moment, it seemed like Jiang Inoue had complete control of the situation. No, I have to think of something. If this goes on, Loopy Toad's shadow will be captured sooner or later. Little Silver wasn't optimistic about the current situation. The Shadow Explosion Goddess moved far faster than he could imagine. Once Loopy Toad was caught, death was just a countdown. Loopy Toad hadn't truly become a holy beast yet. Its self-healing ability was far weaker than a holy beast's. Once it was blown to pieces, unless Ling Jinren personally took action, there was absolutely no way it could be restored. Wait a little longer. Compared with Little Silver, Wang Zhen was a lot calmer. He had seen too many battles like this. Until the last moment, the outcome of any battle couldn't be determined. Loopy Toad looked like it was at a disadvantage, but Wang Zhen could in fact see that it was looking for the right way to deal with the situation. Do you think you still have a chance of winning? I don't even care about the numinous mother from back then, let alone a mere green-furred dog like you? Jiang Yinyue's smile was extremely confident as she manipulated her shadow image to attack Loopy Toad without the slightest scruple. Although Loopy Toad was constantly dodging in Jiang Yinyue's view, this was just a trick. Because these 1,000-year-old stalactites in the cave had absorbed natural spirit energy, the environment here had a natural fluorescent effect, and any living creature that set foot here would inevitably have a shadow cast on them. In other words, this was what Jiang Yinyue thought was the best place to attack. As long as she could project a shadow, she would always have an advantage. Numinous mother, you can't touch her, Loopy Toad said earnestly to Jiang Yinyue. Mother Wang's status in the Wang family was unimaginably high. If Jiang Yinyue really was blind enough to dare lay a hand on her, forget about Father Wang, even Wang Ling would personally go to battle and skin Jiang Yinyue alive. So from the very beginning Loopy Toad had felt that something was fishy. It felt that the numinous mother Jiang Yinyue had encountered might not be Mother Wang herself. Nowadays there were plenty of swindlers who pretended to be popular celebrities, and the chances of encountering a swindler were very high. Taking 10,000 steps back, if the person they had encountered had really been Mother Wang, and she had in fact been preserving her strength as the numinous mother, Loopy Toad felt that it was impossible for its little master Wang Ling not to have sensed it at all. So to sum up, the chances of Jiang Yinyue running into the fake Mother Wang back then were higher. But it was clear now that no matter what explanation Loopy Toad gave, Jiang Yinyue wouldn't listen. She was eager for revenge, and had been looking forward to a second battle with the numinous mother since her resurrection. When she had mistakenly thought that the legendary ancestor of the world of killers, numinous mother, had died at her hands, the impulse that she had been suppressing for a long time had finally erupted, and she had vented it all on Loopy Toad in one fell swoop. If you're going to persist in going about things the wrong way, then I'll have to use my tricks. Loopy Toad sighed. It hadn't wanted to reveal its shadow image ability in advance before they met the person behind the scenes, but it now looked like Jiang Yinyue's shadow image was indeed too troublesome. The ability to plant a bomb on a shadow the moment it touched it was truly heaven-defying. Helpless, Loopy Toad could only choose to send out its shadow image for a duel. His shadow image was called Godly Fortress. It was an ability that could instantly form a defensive rampart and turn its shadow into a castle. A mere bomb. It was an indestructible castle. Loopy Toad was absolutely confident that it could win this round. As Wang Ling's dog, it absolutely couldn't lose face. Chapter 1184. The huge shadow image was in the shape of a steel toad. Its entire body was made of copper and iron, and Loopy Toad could control its size. Because it had been fighting in the stalactite cave, Loopy Toad had already shrunk the size of the fortress as much as possible, but it still looked stunning. This was a mobile fortress that was indestructible and had fierce firepower. There were no less than dozens of cannons of different calibers set up on its back alone. These cannons were energy storage, and required a certain amount of spirit energy in the body in order to store up cannonballs. The main reason Loopy Toad hadn't summoned its shadow image before was because it wanted to store spirit power. It had been storing spirit power for its shadow image all this time, and now it was finally putting it to use. The moment the Toad Fortress appeared, it instantly released a dazzling light that dispersed all the shadows nearby. All of this was within Loopy Toad's calculations. Jiang Yinyue's shadow image ability was shadow bombs, which could be implanted by touching shadows. While this ability was tricky, if Loopy Toad could freely control the fortress's lighting, it would be able to precisely control its shadow so that it remained at its feet instead of projecting it as a long strip. You can try and see if my fortress's spirit power cannons are faster or if your shadow bombs can reach me first. At that moment, Loopy Toad was maintaining a very long distance from Jiang Yinyue. Its shadow image's advantage was its defense and range. Even if Jiang Yinyue wanted to blow herself up here with a doppelganger spell, Loopy Toad could instantly swallow Wang Zhen and Little Silver into its impregnable fortress. The bombs might be fierce, but they were still within the range of its fortress's defenses. Even if Loopy Toad was injured, as long as Little Silver gave it a few drops of holy beast blood, it would be instantly healed. You want to use cannons on me in this terrain? I'm afraid that won't be good for you. Jiang Yinyue frowned slightly. The green-furred dog in front of her was more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. What surprised Jiang Yinyue even more was that Loopy Toad actually also possessed the power of Shadow Dao. The situation was becoming more and more interesting to Jiang Yinyue. I can use as many as 30 types of cannonballs, and naturally I have cannonballs specially designed for narrow terrain like this. Loopy Toad didn't want to explain too much. In its view, the outcome of this battle was already decided. His annihilation bomb had the ability to automatically track. When it touched an object that needed to be destroyed, it wouldn't cause a big explosion. Instead, it would produce a strong acid that could instantly melt a person into a pool of acid. But to be honest, Loopy Toad didn't want to kill Jiang Yingyue straight away. In Loopy Toad's view, Mother Wang's mystery hadn't been completely solved. If it killed Jiang Yingyue here, this matter would probably become an unsolved mystery in the future. Now, the most probable guess was that someone was using the identity of numinous Mother Wang Ma to swindle people everywhere, and Jiang Yingyue was one of the victims among the countless killers who had been deceived. Looks like you still haven't made up your mind to kill me. That is a taboo in battle. At this moment, Jiang Yingyue laughed evilly. She grinned, revealing her snow-white teeth. Her somewhat morbid face had a tinge of redness. The next moment she moved swiftly. Loopy Toad would never be able to forget this scene, which was the desperate stance of someone who had given up everything. As the legendary third epic-level killer on the ranking list of killers, Jiang Yingyue's ability to seize opportunities was far superior to that of the twin sisters from Shadow Stream. She was fierce and decisive without the slightest hesitation. Wind and Thunder 9 kills. She threw the dagger in her hand, and in the few seconds it was in the air, she swiftly made a hand seal. In a split second, the dagger flashed with electricity, wind and thunder surged, and the deafening sound of thunder shook everyone's eardrums. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Insignificant skill. Loopy Toad controlled the fortress to assume a defensive stance, and the dagger didn't pierce Loopy Toad's solid armor. Wind and Thunder 9 kills wasn't a very high-level assassination spell, and most importantly, Loopy Toad realized that the dagger Jiang Yingyue had used was of very poor quality. Not only hadn't it been able to pierce through the walls of his fortress, it had actually broken off at the outermost layer of the fortress defensive light membrane. You should be able to tell. Yes, this is indeed a very ordinary dagger, and it doesn't even have a sharpened edge. But as long as it's effective, even the most ordinary dagger is very deadly. Jiang Yingyue chuckled as she walked step by step in Loopy Toad's direction, as if she wasn't afraid of the threat of Loopy Toad's bombardment at all. It was only at that moment that Loopy Toad seemed to finally realize the crux of the problem. From the very beginning, Jiang Yingyue's Wind and Thunder 9 kills hadn't been meant to kill him. Jiang Yingyue hadn't even planned to kill him with this move. She was using the high-frequency electricity that the Wind and Thunder 9 kills could create in a short period of time to find an angle to control the shadow under his feet to lengthen. This might only take less than 3 seconds, but he had already unknowingly entered Jiang Yingyue's firing range. So from the very beginning, the other party's goal hadn't been to kill him with the Wind and Thunder 9 kills, but to use the electricity to touch his shadow and set up a bomb. Finally realized? Jiang Yingyue smiled. I'm already a dead man, so it's not a loss for me to trade 1 for 1. You've already lost. Jiang Yingyue was very confident in the explosive power of the shadow bomb. Even if the steel fortress was impregnable, if the shadow blew it up from the inside, no matter how strong the external defense was, it would be useless. This is a time bomb. In 1 minute you'll be reduced to ashes. So, do you have any last words? Asked Jiang Yingyue. I do indeed have one last question. Loopy Toad's voice was unexpectedly calm. What I want to know is, when Numinous Mother agreed to fight you back then, did she receive any benefits? Benefits? Jiang Yingyue smiled. She's the ancestor of the world of killers and the senior of all us killers. Shouldn't we give her some tuition fees before the duel? So, you gave her money? The corners of Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. The life and death contract said that as long as I survived the duel with her, I could use all the abilities I comprehended during the duel. It was a pity that I died in battle, but I didn't regret it. How much was the tuition? Not much, 100 million for 1 duel. I thought I wouldn't die, so I signed up for a membership card which only cost 50 million to fight once. Jiang Yingyue counted on her fingers. I remember that I recharged 1 billion in one go? You actually recharged money? Loopy Toad, Wang Zhen and Little Silver were stunned. They were now certain that this numinous mother, who had been begging for a fight everywhere, was a swindler. Chapter 1185. At this point, the truth had already come to light. Given Mother Wang's personality, there was no way she would swindle people, so someone had to be impersonating numinous Mother. It was just that only Jiang Yingyue knew who this person was and what they looked like. Loopy Toad hadn't expected that after accepting Little Master Ling's main mission, to eliminate the person behind the scenes, they would inadvertently receive a new side mission: find the swindler who had been using Numinous Mother's identity all along to swindle people. This matter concerned Mother Wang's reputation, and judging from the impostor's behavior so far, the other party seemed to have a certain understanding of Mother Wang. If in the end the other party decided to retire and transfer all the sins to Wang Ma, a powerless body refining stage cultivator, would definitely get herself killed. So to sum it up, Loopy Toad felt that Jiang Yingyu couldn't die. At the very least, before they found the impostor, Jiang Yingyu's knowledge of the impostor might be the best clue at hand. You look like you want to fight back, but you no longer have the chance. Jiang Yingyu stared at Loopy Toad as her shadow bomb entered its final countdown. Once the last 10 seconds were over, it would immediately explode. Using a low-level assassination spell like Wind and Thunder 9 kills to confuse the enemy's line of sight was in fact using this brief flash of lightning to quickly adjust the position of the shadow and then install the bomb. This kind of attack where the real and the fake interacted was one of the highest realms of battle. This kind of battle strategy often wasn't developed on the spot, but was achieved after a long period of accumulated experience. But at that moment Loopy Toad laughed coldly. Your combat level is indeed very high. It's indeed very difficult to reach this level without the accumulation of hundreds of thousands of battles. But this king wants to say that while battle strategy is important, being able to predict the enemy's next move is even more important. You have 3 seconds left. Jiang Yingyu sighed in her heart. She hadn't expected the green-furred dog in front of her to actually be in the mood to give an explanation at a time like this. Was it trying to prove the law of immortality in battle? She counted down in her heart, as if she could already see the green-furred dog being blown to pieces by the bomb. Although the shadow bomb only blew up the shadow and wouldn't cause any damage to the surrounding environment, once the shadow was broken, the body would immediately be torn to pieces. This was the frightening thing about her shadow bomb. It could silently take away a person's life. 3, 2, 1. As the countdown ended, Jiang Yingyu turned around. A true expert would never face an explosion head-on. However, after taking a few steps, she realized that something was not right. The familiar explosion did not come, and the green-furred dog in human form and its companions were alive and well. They were not blown into pieces of flesh like she had imagined. Impossible. Jiang Yingyu turned around. Only now did she realize that she had been tricked. At some point, Loopy Toad, which had been in its human form, had suddenly turned into its dog form and swiftly attacked her from behind like a green bolt of lightning. Jiang Yingyu still didn't know what was going on. She only saw the huge virtual body of a demon king appear behind Loopy Toad, and then her vision immediately went black. Suddenly he couldn't see anything. This was the sky-swallowing Toad clan's swallowing and spitting spell, which was passed down through the generations. It could swallow anything into the space in its mouth. The shadow bomb was suddenly terrifying. It could be planted in the shadows. But if it was in an absolutely dark and enclosed space, where no shadow appeared, then it would be impossible to move. The shadow bomb's ability was almost like a decoration. Jiang Yingyu struggled in the darkness as she was swallowed into the space. This space was much larger than she had imagined, and there was no echo when she shouted, "Useless Junior. You've entered this king's space and you still want to escape?" Loopy Toad sneered. Little Master Ling had already strengthened its dog form swallowing and spitting spell. The swallowing and spitting spell space was extremely wide and impregnable. Once someone at Jiang Yingyu's realm was trapped inside, there was absolutely no way she could break free. The only thing Loopy Toad needed to pay attention to was that no light could penetrate the space inside, so that Jiang Yingyu wouldn't have a chance to use the shadow bomb. Loopy Toad had already predicted that given Jiang Yingyu's conceited personality, she would never stare at the bomb when it exploded. A lot of experts had the habit of turning their heads when they didn't see an explosion. Thus, Loopy Toad instantly seized the opportunity to directly pounce on Jiang Yingyu, turning the situation around and winning. You're not a simple dog. Trapped in the space, Jiang Yingyu realized that she couldn't escape after struggling, so she gave up and decided to conserve her strength to look for another opportunity. In any case, this king is a demon king of the demon race. Now that I've turned from good to good and received some advice, I'm even stronger than before. Demon King? Jiang Yingyu was stupefied. To be honest, the spirit chi on Loopy Toad's body was too clean. She didn't sense the slightest bit of a demon king's demon chi on Loopy Toad. At that moment, she felt as if she had been swallowed by an artificial black hole. It was so dark that there was no light at all, and any light effects created by spells would be instantly and cleanly absorbed by this space. The difference was no more than a few microseconds. No matter what Jiang Yingyu did, there was no way she could set up a bomb to blow up this space. I have one more question. Although it had been declared a temporary failure, Jiang Yingyu was still unconvinced. How did you dodge my shadow bomb? Junior, you suddenly have a very good idea. But you don't seem to have noticed the shadow bomb's fatal flaw, Loopy Toad replied patiently. Fatal flaw? You can turn the shadow you touch into a bomb, but this kind of bomb has limitations. If the shadow changes in the meantime, your bomb will fail, Loopy Toad said. What you touched was my human-shaped shadow, and after I turned into a dog, my shadow immediately became different. As a result, your shadow bomb also failed, so it didn't cause me any harm, and there wasn't any explosion as you imagined. Reset. Jiang Ying, you hadn't expected this kind of thing to happen. That's right. You were tricked. But how did you know about this? Jiang Ying, you felt it was inconceivable. There are times when battle strategy is important, but any strategy is useless against a gambler. This king bet that your bomb won't work on me after I turn into a shadow. So, this battle is my victory. Loopy Toad smiled confidently. Chapter 1186. Jiang Ying, you didn't expect that she would be defeated in such a way by the enemy she didn't want to lose to the most. In this completely closed space, not even a bit of light could penetrate through. The slippery and sticky space spirit liquid under her feet made Jiang Ying, you feel even more gloomy. This king has taken you down, but you seem to be very unwilling? After swallowing Jiang Yingyue, Loopy Toad kept an eye on her reaction. It didn't doubt at all that she was plotting to escape the space. What he needed to do now was to raise his vigilance and not let Jiang Yingyu find any opportunity. How many experts are there in this stalactite cave? Loopy Toad changed back into its human form and asked Jiang Luiying about the situation. Wang Ling had personally set up his special space, which cut off all external information and was no different from a small black hole. Jiang Yingyue was imprisoned in his heart, which was equivalent to being completely cut off from the outside world. In another dimension, she could only hear Loopy Toad's voice. Do you think I'm a person who would betray others? You don't have to tell me anything about the person behind the scenes. You only need to provide information about the others. I need to know what they're capable of. We can figure out a way to defeat the enemy ourselves, said Loopy Toad. So, what's the difference between this and colluding with the enemy? Jiang Yingyu sneered. Do you really want to rely on the person who resurrected you? He is a rebellious disciple who disobeys the heavenly Tao. Sooner or later he will suffer the wrath of the heavens. Loopy Toad calmly analyzed the situation for Jiang Yingyu. You're absolutely safe here. Even if the person behind the scenes is punished by heavenly Tao in the end, all the resurrected will disappear. As long as you stay here, you'll be able to keep your life. And I'll promise you something else. As the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Loopy Toad still didn't know how many enemies the other side had in their camp, so it felt that this was an excellent opportunity to win Jiang Yingyue over. Furthermore, it had a trump card in its hands that Jiang Yingyue couldn't refuse. I'm also a person who has seen the world. Ordinary conditions are useless to me. In the space, Jiang Yingyue gently rotated the handle of the umbrella and opened it. She crossed her legs and gently lifted her buttocks to sit on the surface of the umbrella. Her whole body floated up and left the ground. If I said that the numinous mother you saw was fake, would you believe me? Loopy Toad continued at that moment. Fake. This was impossible. She was so strong. And so intellectual and elegant. As you say, she was an intellectual and elegant woman. Do you think such a person would be addicted to material things? Are you obsessed with money? These words made Jiang Yingyu fall into deep thought. In fact, this matter was indeed a little strange. Collecting tuition fees was not in line with numinous mother's character. This was the person she admired the most in her life. If the enemy she paid so much for was a fake, it would be the regret of her life. What kind of person is the real numinous mother? An existence more powerful than the fake you've seen. She's a person with a strong heart, said Loopy Toad. On the other side, Jiang Yingyu thought hard. Do you dare to swear to everything you said? A great heart demon oath is not reliable. If you think this king is lying to you, this king can swear an oath. Forget it. You don't have to go through so much trouble. I can trust you this once. However, I am only responsible for providing information on abilities that I know. Jiang Yingyu took a deep breath and gave her final reply. She did not care what the person behind the scenes who resurrected her was planning. But meeting numinous mother was indeed what Jiang Yingyu wanted to do the most at the moment. In her heart, she told herself that if she couldn't meet the idol of her dreams, Even if she was given another chance to live, in the end, it would only be regret. Entering the second zone of the stalactite cave without a hitch, the humidity in the cave was even heavier and the walls were covered with all kinds of mushrooms. These mushrooms were bright purple and red and gave off a faint fluorescent glow. One look was enough to tell that they were poisonous things that couldn't be eaten. Wang Jin found an old four-legged furnace. The surface of the furnace was already covered in rust due to the humidity in the stalactite cave. Turning on the furnace, Wang Jin reached out to touch the embers in the furnace. He raised 2 fingers to the tip of his nose and sniffed. This furnace was last used a month ago. You can even smell this. In the chat channel, Little Silver was amazed by Wang Jin's sense of smell. Logically speaking, this should be Loopy Toad's job. Wang Jin is right. Loopy Toad also sniffed. This elixir is made from the nearby fluorescent mushrooms. It can be used to relieve the humidity in the body. From the clues they had gathered so far, Old Huang was in fact a very particular person. Cultivators, especially elderly cultivators, were very afraid of humidity entering their bodies. The humidity in the cultivation world was extraordinary. If the body was too damp, it would freeze the meridians and affect the output of spirit qi. Old Huang had been stationed in this stalactite cave on 9 Dragon Mountain all year round, so he naturally knew how to use the natural resources here to dispel the humidity. He was a very particular old gentleman. He's been living here for a long time. This level of moisture has to be expelled at least once a week. Wang Jin frowned. The last time this pill furnace had been used was a month ago, which meant that the real Old Huang might have been swapped a month ago. When he thought about it carefully, Wang Jin suddenly felt terrified. If Old Huang had already been switched a month ago, how could Old Huang have been replaced? If Old Huang had been swapped out a month ago, then there was a high probability that the enemy would coordinate their actions from within and without. In other words, it was very likely that all their current actions were under the enemy's control. Because of his combat experience in the domain of the gods, Wang Jin suddenly had a bad feeling. Do you feel it? In the space, Jiang Yingyue sighed softly. I think the 3 of you might not even be able to make it through the second zone. The resurrectees, who were placed in the stalactite cave, were ranked according to their overall combat strength. The resurrectees at the bottom of the ranking were stronger, so the fact that Wang Jin had taken care of them alone didn't mean anything. In fact, in terms of realm strength alone, Jiang Yingyue was ranked in the top 3 among the resurrectees, but with the power of Shadow Dao, this ranking had to be reset. Some shadow image abilities were so disgusting that even Jiang Yingyue herself couldn't bear to watch them. Her shadow bomb also seemed very abnormal, but it had the fatal weakness of being easily reset and having a short range. Once it was seen through, it would be very easy to deal with. He's here. At that moment, Jiang Yingyue opened her slender eyes in the secluded space and sensed a familiar aura. Who is it? The person ranked 7th among the resurrectees, Li Huanran. His shadow image is called Demon Shadows. Demon Shadows? It's very dangerous. Be careful. Chapter 1187. Layers of Demon Shadow. It's an ability that can implant shadows into the mind and turn them into psychological shadows, Jiang Yingyue replied. She had fought Li Huanran before, so she was well aware of the thorny nature of this ability. Layers of Demon Shadow could implant all the shadows within sight into a person's heart, thus creating fear of their surroundings. It was a powerful mental interference type of shadow image. This kind of fear would penetrate deep into the heart and marrow, and a person affected by it wouldn't be able to escape for a short period of time. Even a heavenly Dao spell that could calm the mind wouldn't have any effect. A spirit-type shadow image, huh? It did sound very powerful. Hearing Jiang Yingyue's description, Loopy Toad raised its eyebrows slightly. This was the first time it had seen this type of shadow image, and it was of great value to study it. This time, the 3 of them had been sent by Wang Ling to deal with the mastermind behind the scenes, but in the process, they could also collect more information on Shadow Dao in passing. At this moment, a series of footsteps came from the dark stalactite cave, and a young man with long black hair slowly walked out of the cave. He wore a tight black outfit, and a dark red waistband accentuated the young man's slender figure. Loopy Toad felt that the name Li Huanran sounded familiar, as if it had heard it somewhere before. He's the son of Fist Master Li Shaokai who passed away, said Little Silver. In addition to the list of vicious criminals who might be resurrected in the dark web, there was also a list of righteous people. These were the righteous powerhouses of the cultivation world who had passed away due to various accidents in the past. As Master Li Shaokai's son, Li Huanran was also on this list. After the famous martial artist Mr. Li Shaokai had punched through the void gate at his birthday party and passed away, his son Li Huanran had been looking for a way to find Master Li Shaokai, and in the end had lost his life. Li Huanran always believed that his father wasn't dead, but was trapped in the world of the void gate and couldn't come back. That's why he did everything he could to open the void gate again and rescue Master Li. Little Silver had done his homework on that period of history. Since he was learning to write novels from Father Wang, he needed to collect all kinds of material for characters, so he had a photographic memory of almost everything he read. This material was ready-made, and it was better than some unscrupulous authors who kept refusing to come by on the pretext of going out to collect material. It seems that Li Huanran has failed. Indeed. It is said that Li Huanran failed to break through the void gate, and his body was corroded by the spiritual energy of the void. When we found it, only half a palm was left. At this point, everyone fell silent. Wang Zhen felt that he had underestimated the scheming of the person behind the scenes. Not only did he resurrect the villains, but he also resurrected some righteous experts and made use of them. Li Huanran is Master Li Shaokai's son. He's always been righteous, but did you see the look in his eyes? He's losing control right now. Little Silver watched Li Huanran slowly walk over from a distance. Li Huanran's eyes were absent-minded, as if he was in a deeply controlled state, and there was no light in his pupils. He was the son of the famous martial artist Master Li Shaokai. Now that he had resurrected, he had become a powerful shadow path user. It went without saying how difficult it was to deal with him. At this critical moment, while Li Huanran had once been a positive character, if he had already become an enemy, then Wang Zhen's mission now was still to fight. Li Huanran didn't say a word. He had already chosen his target based on his judgment, and his eyes finally focused on Wang Zhen. You chose me as your opponent? Wang Zhen took the initiative to step forward. He could already sense the hostility and murderous intent in Li Huanran's eyes. Wang Zhen assumed a fighting stance and exhaled like orchids. He felt that he might not necessarily be Li Huanran's match in terms of physical skills. In fact, he had often fought with Li Huanran in the domain of the gods. Although he lost every time, he had accumulated a lot of experience. Although Li Huanran was under Wang Zhen's control, his professional habits, which he had built up over the years, made it almost a professional habit the moment he saw Wang Zhen take up his stance. His feet shook as he took a step back, his body lithe and supple as if he didn't have any bones. Then he spread open his fingers and chi swirled around his fingertips, which actually produced the roar of a dragon. This is Master Li Shaokai's Dragon Fist, which made him famous back then, Little Silver explained on the side. Dragon Fist. Wang Zhen's expression was especially serious. Wang Zhen didn't know how much of an advantage he would have if he competed with Li Huanran in fist techniques. But judging from Shadow Image's ability, it seemed that it would be better to use fist techniques to determine the victor than to compete with Li Huanran in Shadow Dao. This was Wang Zhen's battle strategy. He hoped to find Li Huanran's flaw in the process of this fist technique competition. In the next moment, Li Huanran's entire body flashed, and he actually disappeared in front of Wang Zhen in a flash. So fast. Wang Zhen held back all his muscles and tried to use his physical strength to resist, but Li Huanran moved extremely quickly. His hand turned into the shape of a dragon as he grabbed Wang Zhen's back, and directly tore off a layer of skin along with number 60 high school uniform. This was the claw technique of Dragon Fist, and the power of this claw was appalling. Because Wang Zhen had been beaten up in all kinds of ways since he was young, the injury from this claw didn't hurt much. He had used his physical strength to resist Li Huanran's attack just to test how much strength Li Huanran had. As it turned out, Li Huanran indeed lived up to his reputation as Master Li Shaokai's son. Not only was his attack extremely fast, it was also very fierce. Of course, the most important thing was that Wang Zhen realized that Li Huanran's observation ability was extremely strong. The moment Wang Zhen made his move, he had noticed that Wang Zhen was trying to use his physical strength to resist the Dragon Fist. So Wang Zhen had switched to Dragon Fist's claw technique in the middle of the punch to increase the damage by changing the pressure of contact. As expected of the son of a martial artist, Wang Zhen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Not only had the Dragon Fist's claw attack just now torn off a piece of his skin, it had also sent chi into his body, which had shaken his internal organs. But this level of internal injury wasn't a big deal for Wang Zhen. Because of his physique, he would spit out as much blood as he suffered internal injuries. Furthermore, after spitting out blood, his body would recover on its own in a very short period of time. This recovery mechanism included the creation of new blood, the repair of internal and external injuries, the remodeling of cells, the repair of internal organs and various bone fractures. In short, internal injuries weren't a problem for Wang Zhen at all as long as he could spit out blood. After all, when Gu Xuanji had punched him once, Wang Zhen had spat out 3 liters of blood on the spot. In Wang Zhen's opinion, Li Huanran's attack was also very strong, but it was indeed still far from Gu Xuanji's level. P.S. For a review of Master Li Shaokai, see Chapter 1070. Chapter 1188. It went without saying how powerful the blood coagulation recovery technique was. It was one of Wang Zhen's greatest assets in the martial arts world, and also a key skill to gauge the strength of the enemy, because he could judge how strong the other party was based on the amount of blood he spat out. Even if Li Huanran had only used less than 20% of his strength in that blow just now, it was still a lot lighter than when Gu Xuanji had hit him. Wang Zhen even thought that a casual slap from his parents would be harder than Li Huanran's. But even so, as the son of the famous martial artist Li Shaokai, Li Huanran was still lacking in strength, but his technique was still redeeming. Even so, Wang Zhen's expression didn't relax in the slightest in the face of Li Huanran. He was testing Li Huanran and Li Huanran was testing him. In a match, the gap between the two could often be seen in the first exchange. Li Huanran's expression didn't change in the slightest even when he knew there was a gap between them, which was the most frightening. Did he still have hidden skills? Wang Zhen narrowed his eyes slightly. He saw qi condensing in Li Huanran's body. As an outstanding martial artist, he could mix qi and blood in his body with spirit qi to stimulate blood circulation and break through acupoints. Was it similar to the Tiangang martial arts? Wang Zhen thought of a move from martial god in the domain of the gods, which was also a spell that increased one's strength by stimulating acupoints. But this method of increasing one's strength by stimulating acupoints was usually extremely harmful to the body. This is polar boxing. Little Silver said at that moment. According to the information he had, Li Huanran had used this move to increase his strength in order to open the gate of the void to find his father and ensure that he had sufficient strength. Back then, Li Huanran activated level 12 of the highest polar boxing in order to open the gate of the void. That's why Li Huanran couldn't be saved even if he successfully opened the gate of the void, Little Silver said. Level 12 of the highest polar boxing attacked the acupoints and meridians all over the body, giving the body enormous strength in a short period of time. The energy it brought was no different from igniting one's body. Every minute and every second brought tremendous pain as if it was being burned. At that moment, Li Huanran had already finished gathering qi. The process seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it had happened in the blink of an eye. Wang Zhen could clearly sense that Li Huanran's aura had become stronger. 3 spiritual tattoos appeared on his face, which was the sign of the activation of the extreme fist Dao. The spirit runes would be directly displayed on the face in such a manner. 3 spiritual inscriptions was the 3rd level of the extreme boxing Dao. This was not Li Huanran's full power, so it was far from life-threatening at the moment. His body would only feel pain when he reached the 10th layer. 11 layers. The burning sensation would intensify, but it wasn't the end of the line yet. However, if he maintained it for too long he would die. 12 layers. This was a situation where he went all out and couldn't be stopped. At most he could only maintain it for 5 minutes. Death was inevitable. Just a triple? Wang Zhen felt that he was still being looked down upon. Li Huanran didn't seem to take him seriously at all. Is it because you have the support of the Shadow Dao? Is that why you are confident that you can defeat me? Wang Zhen laughed self-deprecatingly in his heart. He saw the conceited look in Li Huanran's eyes, which reminded him of the first time he had fought Wang Ling. They were full of confidence and even conceit. However, the biggest reason why cultivation had become the goal of so many people was because of the unknown. The cultivation path, which was filled with all kinds of unknowns, was the core of so many cultivators' tireless pursuit of heavenly Tao. If you look down on me, something big is going to happen. Wang Zhen gave Li Huanran a warning, but unfortunately, Li Huanran didn't take it to heart. He assumed a fighting stance. As he opened and closed his fists and palms, Wang Zhen saw countless black shadows pour into Li Huanran's fists. Finally using the power of your shadow image? Loopy Toad saw a huge demon shadow appear behind Li Huanran. It looked like a western demon with long, pointed palms. This scene made Jiang Yingyu sigh slightly. She had witnessed the power of the devil shadow layer. Every time Li Huanran threw out a punch, the power of the 2 shadows would be injected into the opponent's mind like a syringe, causing the opponent's mind to fall into complete chaos. If they continued to use close-range attacks at this time, they would completely fall into Li Huanran's trap. However, contrary to Jiang Yingyue's expectations, Wang Zhen's choice was actually to brace himself and fight Li Huanran head-on. Is he crazy? In Loopy Toad's internal space, Jiang Yingyue could see what was happening outside through Loopy Toad's spirit-sharing spell. Not only did Wang Zhen not choose to evade, he braced himself and charged forward, which in Jiang Yingyue's view was completely suicidal. The mental suppression of the demon shadow is no joke. Jiang Yingyue still felt that Wang Zhen's choice was inconceivable. A few seconds later, Li Huanran's and Wang Zhen's fists collided. Both of them were equally fast and too fast for the eye to follow. In a split second, the flying fist shadows turned into countless large snakes that collided with each other. The violent collision caused the entire stalactite cave to shake. Countless pieces of rock fell from the ceiling, and the moment the prismatic stalactites got close to where the two of them were fighting, they were shattered by the friction between them. He's already lost. Jiang Yingyue shook her head repeatedly. At this rate, the two of them had exchanged no less than 100 punches in a second, and Wang Zhen had suffered the equivalent of being hit by the demon shadow hundreds of times. This was already the limit of a normal person. No matter how big a person's heart was, they couldn't withstand such enormous mental pressure. However, a scene that Jiang Yingyue hadn't expected happened in the end. Under Li Huanran's heavy offensive, Wang Zhen unexpectedly didn't show the slightest hint of fear on his face. He met Li Huanran's fists one after another with an appropriate rhythm and steady aura, and unexpectedly didn't show any signs of fear. Impossible. No one can maintain this kind of mentality when faced with the demon shadow. Jiang Yingyue remembered that when she had fought Li Huanran earlier, she had only exchanged a few dozen punches, but she had already felt a strong sense of guilt and the urge to die. In fact, it doesn't matter who makes a move. Whether it's Wang Zhen, this king, or Silver Jinren on the side, the three of us won't feel afraid, said Loopy Toad. What? Jiang Yingyue didn't understand. It's a secret. Loopy Toad kept her guessing. The three of them still had Wang Ling behind them. In terms of strength, who in the universe could be stronger than Wang Ling? Only those who had fought Wang Ling knew. Ling Jinren's slap was the greatest psychological trauma. In contrast, the demon shadow was nothing. Chapter 1189. As an outstanding meat shield warrior, Wang Zhen's talent in martial arts was self-evident. Although he wasn't as good as Gu Xuanji, he had fought Gu Xuanji so many times in the domain of the gods that he could learn a few moves just by copying Gu Xuanji's moves. Coupled with the fact that he had been beaten up since he was a child, the truth was that even if he hadn't met Wang Ling, he wouldn't have been afraid of the mental control of layers of devil shadows. His tolerance for psychological trauma was far greater than that of an ordinary person. This was basically what his real dad and mom had taught him since he was a child through the husband and wife mixed doubles, which normal people wouldn't be able to imitate. It was also not recommended that parents use this kind of domestic violence method to train their children in order to strengthen their children's mental endurance. Wang Zhen could do this on the one hand because of his physique and on the other hand because his real parents' brain circuits were different from that of ordinary people. If this had happened on Earth, he would have been sentenced under the domestic violence law. He's actually stronger than I thought. Jiang Yingyue felt a little silly. Wang Zhen's strength was beyond his imagination, and this kind of mental endurance was really rare. If he had an attribute panel, it would at the very least be a 3A panel for strength, speed, and mental strength. I never thought that such a person would actually appear on Earth not long after I died. Jiang Yingyue sighed in Loopy Toad's independent space. Loopy Toad laughed in its heart when it heard this. Wang Zhen was indeed very strong, but he came from the domain of the gods, which couldn't compare to Earth's battle strength to begin with. If it wasn't for the fact that Heavenly Tao had sealed off most of his power, Li Huanran wouldn't have been able to withstand even one punch from Wang Zhen. Although Wang Zhen was currently supported by the power of Shadow Tao, his overall battle strength was still a little worse than it had been at his peak. So, it really wasn't surprising that Wang Zhen was strong. Loopy Toad felt that Jiang Yingyue was surprised mainly because she had never seen a real hexagonal warrior before. Of course, the so-called hexagonal was just a metaphor. Wang Ling was strong enough to support any shape. Even if it was 48, he could support it perfectly. At that moment the battle was still going on. Seeing that his layers of devil shadows had no effect on Wang Zhen, Li Huanran was clearly puzzled. It had to be known that the mental suppression effect of his Shadow Tao had never failed like this before. Li Huanran thought that it was because his attacks were not fierce enough, so he increased the power of his ultimate boxing to the 6th level. His strength was greater than before. Every punch landed on Wang Zhen's flesh, and every punch caused Wang Zhen to spit out a large mouthful of blood. But as a tank warrior, Wang Zhen's ability to withstand pressure was truly astonishing. The blood coagulation recovery technique helped him immediately recover from his injuries while he was being beaten. His level 6 extreme boxing was still far from his goal of vomiting 3 liters of blood, and hadn't reached Wang Zhen's baseline at all. But at the same time, Wang Zhen was also thinking of a solution. He didn't want Li Huanran to continue stacking the power of ultimate boxing, because the result was very obvious. Li Huanran would die. In Wang Zhen's view, Li Huanran was like Jiang Yingyue, whom Lupi Toad had previously subdued, and was perhaps a companion he could pull into his camp. The way to end this battle now was very simple. He just needed to help Li Huanran remove the shackles of his mind control. As long as Li Huanran wasn't controlled as Master Li Xiaokai's son, he was an absolutely positive figure in the cultivation world. He definitely wouldn't help the person behind the scenes continue to commit crimes. But how to make Li Huanran pull himself together again was a big problem. On the surface, Li Huanran has been hit by a very powerful mind control spell, and it's very likely that it was cast along with the resurrection spell, so the moment Li Huanran was resurrected, he was already under control. Lupi Toad stared at the battle in front of it as it analyzed the situation in its mind space. "Is there a way to break it?" asked Little Silver. Under normal circumstances, there are generally 3 ways to break such a powerful mind control spell. First, you can use physical attacks to forcibly shake off the other party's mind control. But this method doesn't seem feasible at the moment. Wang Zhen and Li Huanran have been fighting for so long, but Li Huanran hasn't been moved. This method that doesn't involve physical means will be ineffective. You have to use a stronger method. Second, you can directly find the person who cast the mind control spell on him and defeat them. That way, the mind control spell will come into contact with him. Lupi Toad knew that there was no difference between saying this and not saying anything at all. Their purpose in coming to this stalactite cave was to track down the identity of the person behind the scenes and to gather more evidence of old Huang being switched. Thus, after ruling out the above 2 methods, there was only the third method which relied on magic to intervene. But the problem was that all 3 of them seemed to be melee fighters. Lupi Toad could barely be considered half a Fatten, and it wouldn't be easy to dispel a mind control spell of this level. An even more powerful mind control spell was needed to cover the one on Li Huanran. But who among them knew mind control spells? None of them were F***King P. They could control him if they wanted to. Will it be fine as long as I cover him? Wang Zhen asked at that moment. In theory it's possible. Lupi Toad nodded. As long as you have an absolute advantage in casting a mind control spell and ensure that it's stronger than the spell used to control Li Huanran, you can cover him. Then I can try. At that moment, Wang Zhen's expression turned serious again. You can actually use a mind control spell? Aren't you a meat shield warrior? Lupi Toad and Little Silver were flabbergasted. It's not that I can use it, but my shadow image has this ability. So Bound Man can do more than just physical control. As long as I want to, mind control is also possible. Wang Zhen's current idea was actually very simple, which was to use the shadow image effect of Bound Man to cover up the mind control spell on Li Huanran, and then cancel the shadow image effect, so that Li Huanran would become a normal person again. Lupi Toad and Little Silver immediately approved of this idea. If they could pull these resurrected people into their team, they would have a better chance of finding the person behind the scenes. Even if Jiang Yingyu didn't want to say anything as an upright person, once Li Huanran's mind returned to normal, he absolutely wouldn't hide any information. Thinking this, Wang Zhen felt that there was no time to lose. He controlled his Bound Man to charge at Li Huanran. As Wang Zhen had said, apart from the effect of restraining the body, Bound Man in fact also had the power of mind control. Once bound by Bound Man, the person's spirit would immediately change to that of a masochist. Chapter 1190. After comprehending Shadow Dao, everyone's shadow image ability had their own merits, but Wang Ling had personally imparted Wang Zhen's Shadow Dao to him, so there was no need to doubt its strength. Wang Zhen could clearly sense the change in Li Huanran's mental state when Li Huanran's layers of magic shadows suffered from Binding Man's strong man lock. His mind control had been successfully overpowered. His dazed and lifeless pupils gradually began to focus, and his eyes returned to normal. Only when he saw this scene did Wang Zhen relax and release Tide Man. As it turned out, Lupi Toad's inference was completely correct. Li Huanran regained his consciousness, and he could clearly remember everything that had happened because he had lost control of himself just now. His face was full of shame. "I'm sorry, it's not your fault. You were under the mind control of the outlaws." Wang Zhen stepped forward to comfort him, but Li Huanran's expression didn't improve as he kept apologizing. "I'm really sorry." Actually, Loopy Toad could understand this feeling very well. After all, Li Huanran was a descendant of a famous family. He was the biological son of Li Shaokai, the most famous martial artist on earth at that time. He had been working hard to surpass his father all his life. And now, the power that he had cultivated for the sake of upholding justice was actually used by an illegal force at such a critical moment. This was definitely a humiliation for Li Huanran. "Join us and wipe away your shame." At that moment, Little Silver also cheered Li Huanran on the side. Although Li Huanran's shadow demon was ineffective against them, it was clear that this shadow image was still very strong. If Li Huanran could join them, their combat power would increase a bit. A moment later, Li Huanran said, "Sorry? Actually, I have a presumptuous request." "Speak." "Can you use the transformation spell to look like my father and hit me?" Li Huanran's face showed some anticipation. Loopy Toad and Little Silver were startled by this scene. Wasn't the effect of Binding Man dispelled? The two of them looked at Wang Zhen, whose expression was also extremely horrified. He swore. The power of the shadow image had been removed. Logically speaking, Li Huanran no longer had the attribute of being a masochist. Of course, it was definitely not the aftereffect of the Man of Binding. Therefore, the only reasonable explanation was that Li Huanran was a brotherly. "Do you usually?" Loopy Toad stared at Li Huanran and asked cautiously. Li Huanran's face was a little red. He was actually a little embarrassed about this. He had never mentioned this to anyone, but for the sake of the big picture, Li Huanran decided to bravely say it. "In the past, when I was depressed, I would ask my father to give me a slap." Everyone sucked in a cold breath. There was actually such a thing? Could this be the legendary "Daddy hit me one more time"? Wang Zhen patted Li Huanran on the shoulder and sighed ruefully in his heart. "Don't worry, brotherly, leave it to me. I'm a few years older than you and I actually understand this feeling." "You also asked your father to slap you in the face just to get back on your feet." "No, it's not just Dad who hits me, sometimes Mom also." Wang Zhen was at a loss for words, but they didn't have time to continue their discussion. Swiftly changing into Master Li Shaokai's appearance, Wang Zhen unceremoniously slapped Li Huanran in the face. Li Huanran was sent flying and embedded deeply into the stone wall, the outline of a person etched into it. A few seconds later, Li Huanran slowly walked out, his right hand covering his red and swollen face with a 5-fingered mark. Sure enough, he was in high spirits after being slapped by Wang Zhen. The slap looked very heavy, but Wang Zhen had held back, and Li Huanran had only suffered a superficial wound. "Thank you, brother Wang Zhen." After the slap, Li Huanran and Wang Zhen had already become familiar with each other. Loopy Toad felt that in this world, Wang Zhen and Li Huanran were probably the only ones who could share this feeling of heroes cherishing heroes. When a masochist meets another masochist, it really makes one speechless. After pulling Li Huanran into the chat room in the spiritual space, Wang Zhen used his mental transmission ability to briefly explain what had happened and his simple speculations. As they went deeper into the third zone, they exchanged their opinions on the current situation. "I didn't expect such a big thing to happen." Even Li Huanran himself wouldn't have thought that during the period of his death, there would be someone planning such a large-scale criminal activity. Refining the universe into an array and using all the planets in the solar system to construct an array diagram. If the person behind the scenes who had resurrected him had really come for this purpose, then the other party's strength was 100% above that of a true immortal. In the vacuum of space, even a true immortal could only stay there for 5 minutes at most. After 5 minutes, the blood in one's body would gradually freeze, and one would eventually turn into a huge block of human ice, forever drifting in space. "How much of your memory do you have left?" Wang Zhen asked in the spiritual space at that moment. With Li Huanran joining their team, not only did he bring them new combat power, but he also brought them new clues. As someone who had also been resurrected, Wang Zhen was eager to learn relevant information from Li Huanran. "I seem to have had a dream for a long time. I dreamed that I was born from a flower and grew rapidly from an embryo. When I landed, I saw a white-haired young man whose face I couldn't see clearly." "Did he say anything to you?" Little Silver asked. "He didn't say anything. He just snapped his fingers and I lost consciousness." Li Huanran knew that from the moment the young man had snapped his fingers, he had already been under the control of a powerful mind control spell. Little Silver, "So, You've had face-to-face contact with the mastermind behind all this. Wang Jin shook his head. No, it's not just brotherly. I'm afraid that all the resurrected people have had face-to-face contact with this person behind the scenes. I'm afraid so. Li Huanran nodded. I remember it was an abandoned factory, and there were a lot of snow-white flowers growing on the ground. Can you describe what the flowers looked like in detail? The flowers had thick and long roots, and the stamens were the size of sweet potatoes, while the big ones were the size of basketballs. In the center of the stamens was a human-shaped embryo wrapped in white petals. As long as spirit power was injected, the flower would quickly ripen. Even the embryo inside would grow rapidly. Resurrection through spirit plant grafting? Wang Jin was blank. He had never heard of this kind of resurrection technique. Chapter 1191. Wang Jin felt that the person behind the scenes was the strangest thing about all kinds of mystical moves that he had never heard of before. The spells on the other side were a little unorthodox and didn't seem like heavenly Dao spells, let alone spells from the domain of the gods. Could it be from Fate Dao and Divine Dao? Wang Jin couldn't figure it out no matter how he thought about it. On the other hand, Wang Jin had read about the ancient and evil forbidden art of refining the universe into an array in the domain of the gods in ancient texts. However, those texts were all theoretical studies on this forbidden art, and no one had ever actually used it or realized it. Such an evil array will most likely contain sacrifices. At that moment, Wang Jin connected the matter of the sacrifices to the situation of old Huang being switched, and suddenly had a bold idea. The reason why the other party had kidnapped old Huang might not just be to switch him so that they could better hack into Huaxiu Alliance's command system. Wang Jin felt that a large part of the reason probably had something to do with the sacrifices. An almighty like old Huang was the first choice to serve as a sacrifice. Furthermore, it was clear that for the other party to set up such an evil universe-level array, old Huang might not be the only sacrifice. Wang Jin had a new theory about this. After those who were revived awakened Shadow Path, the stronger ones were pushed out as pawns to stall for time. The weak ones will probably be thrown back in as sacrifices. I think your theory is completely reasonable. Li Huanran also felt that Wang Jin's answer was completely logical. They didn't have much time left. Once the refinement array was activated, the altar would be the first to suffer, and destroying it would affect the speed of the refinement array to some extent. In other words, only by destroying the altar could they buy time to deal with the person behind the scenes. It's in Zone 5. At that moment, Li Huanran felt the memory fragments in his mind flicker again as he recalled some crucial information, and he immediately shared it with Wang Jin and the others through the spiritual space. This is the Dome Wind Stalactite Cave, where the heavenly vein main valve is located. The center of Zone 5 is the closest to the main valve, and there's no better place to set up the altar. In my memory, a lot of the people who were resurrected seem to be there. How many do you remember? No less than a few hundred. But they're currently only semi-finished products, and haven't fully developed yet. Li Huanran answered quickly. In his memory, those snow-white flowers were in the depths of Area 5. The white flowers that covered the ground were especially dazzling in this dark stalactite cave. The situation was more serious than Wang Jin had imagined. Due to the urgency of the situation, Wang Jin judged that they might have to change their mission plan this time. Their first priority now was to destroy the altar, since it would greatly increase the speed at which the refining array could be activated. They had to send another group of people to deal with the person behind the scenes. In the end, we still have to ask Little Master Ling for help. It wasn't hard for Loopy Toad to predict this outcome, since the person behind the scenes was far more cunning than it had imagined. But the difficulties in front of them were far more than that. On the way to the altar, they had to encounter many resurrected, who deliberately came out to stop them. Li Huanran's level was only in Division 2. In the next few regions the guards would be even stronger. And the facts proved that it was indeed so. The gatekeeper of the third zone was a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes. The man was slightly chubby and wore a monocle. He exuded an aristocratic aura from head to toe. I know him. Li Huanran immediately recognized the man's background. Who is he? Asked Loopy Toad. Mr. Wu Xiaoling, who is known as the Wild Demon Chef, said Li Huanran. Wild Demon Chef? A chef who mainly cooks wild game. Back then, Wu Xiaoling made a mistake when making bat stingers, which caused those who enjoyed the stingers as well as Wu Xiaoling himself to be infected with a wild bat virus. Furthermore, Wu Xiaoling was cooking a giant wing bat king, which carried no less than hundreds of deadly viruses. These viruses kept spreading and crossing each other, and almost caused the fall of an entire city. Li Huanran recounted the past. And that was when Wu Xiaolang died. He couldn't have eaten good food but had to eat wild game. He really brought this upon himself. Wang Jin sighed. There were a lot of spirit beasts in the world. Some were specially bred for human consumption, while some wild spirit beasts carried natural viruses. It wasn't a pity if they died of a virus after eating wild spirit beasts to satisfy their appetite. Do you have his photo? Loopy Toad asked at that moment. Yes. In the spirit space, Jiang Inue swiftly replied. His photo is called the King of Wild Poison, and he can use his shadow to spread a powerful virus that makes it hard for people to breathe. The poisoned person will slowly feel weak all over, feel cold, lose control of their spirit energy output, and eventually lose the ability to breathe. As expected, it was troublesome enough. Hearing this, everyone's eyes turned cautious. On the other side, Wang Ling received news from Loopy Toad. Wang Zhen, Loopy Toad and Little Silver were just the vanguard spies Wang Ling had sent out. In the end, from the information they had received, the situation was far worse than Wang Ling had imagined. Old Huang, who was suspected to have been switched and was currently serving as a sacrifice. A universe-level alchemy array. This was all-important information that Wang Zhen had investigated so far. Although it wasn't much, each of them was very valuable. Wang Ling didn't know what method the person behind the scenes had used to prevent him from following any leads. But now that he had this information and could trace it in reverse, Wang Ling felt that it wouldn't be too difficult to accomplish this task. Since the other party's goal was to set up a universe-level alchemy array, they would definitely send out people to maintain the heavenly veins of the other planets to ensure that when the main heavenly vein valve on Earth was opened, the other planets would be able to work together in an instant. In other words, the other party had to be in the center of the array, which was the eye of the array to supervise the work. And the eye of the array was probably on top of the sun. Wang Ling raised his head and gazed at the sky with his king's eye. Because of the weather in the last few days, the area around Nine Dragon Mountain had been shrouded in fog. The thick clouds obscured the sun, and Wang Ling had actually overlooked the fact that the other party was hiding on the sun. This was a cunning opponent right in front of him, and more cunning than any other he had encountered before. This matter couldn't be dragged on any longer. Wang Ling planned to take a look at the sun and settle everything as soon as possible. Classmate Wang Ling, are you staring at the sky because you want to bask in the sun? Lotus Sun suddenly asked with concern at that moment. She knew that because of the weather, it was actually very difficult for the sun to show its face these days. But considering that Wang Ling was, after all, a group favorite. Furthermore, it was his duty as the team leader of number 60 Squadron. When a student wanted to bask in the sun, the team leader naturally had to fulfill his or her team members' needs. At that moment, Lotus Sun directly took out a walkie-talkie and began to direct the security team of Huagua Water Curtain Group in the area around Nine Dragon Mountain. Huagua Water Curtain Group's missile team, listen up. Fire the cloud-dispelling missile immediately. I want to see the sun today. Wang Ling. Chapter 1192. Huagua Water Curtain Group had always been equipped with an excellent missile launch unit. Since they were going to refine elixirs, they needed raw materials. It was an unwritten rule in the elixir world that it was better to plant than to buy. Large enterprises all had specialized spirit plant cultivation bases, which could reduce the cost of raw materials to a minimum. As for the significance of the existence of the missile team, it was to meet the needs of the spiritual plants. Some spiritual plants liked rainfall, some liked sunlight, some liked fog, and some even lived by inhaling PM2. Therefore, under this premise, the missile team of Huagua Water Curtain Group came in handy. The cloud-dispelling sunburst was just one type of the missile launch unit's weather bomb. As the name suggested, its main function was to allow the clouds to disperse during rainy or foggy days, allowing the sun to shine on the earth. Apart from this, there was also the Blue Tide Bomb, which could summon rainy days, the Mirage Watermoon Bomb for foggy days, the Wang Wang Ice-Breaking Bomb for hailstorm days, and so on. As expected of Huagua Water Curtain Group, they're rich and overbearing. Super Chin and Hero Guo couldn't help exclaiming in the back. Although this wasn't the first time they had seen Lotus Sun flaunt her wealth, like this, they were still very amazed. The cost of a single climate bomb like this wasn't low. But now, number 60 High's camp really needed the power of sunlight. Because the air was too humid, the talisman team was already complaining that the talisman paper they had produced was too damp, which would reduce the success rate of drawing talismans and also affect the effect of the talismans when they were triggered. Due to the humidity, everyone's bodies were constantly in a wet state. If the sun shone on them, it could solve the urgent problem caused by the humidity. This cloud-dispelling sunburst was launched at the perfect time. It could meet the need for sunlight for 2 hours, which meant that its effect would fade at around 11 o'clock. The temperature on Fire Peak was very high day and night. By launching it at this time, not only could Lotus Sun help everyone get rid of the humidity, they could also avoid direct sunlight at noon, when it was the hottest. Of course, everyone was well aware that Lotus Sun was doing all this for their group pet, classmate Wang Ling. Elsewhere, Wang Ling was making simple preparations for his plan to explore the sun. Wang Zhen was doing his best to stall for time, and Wang Ling had to settle this battle as soon as possible. Although he said he had to settle it as soon as possible, Wang Ling actually wasn't sure how long it would take. Based on all the information he had so far, this was already the most troublesome opponent Wang Ling had ever fought. The information they received was limited. They didn't even know the background of the person behind the scenes. This was a situation that had never happened before. Wang Ling's various prediction and divination spells had no effect on this mysterious person behind the scenes. This was the first time Wang Ling had experienced this feeling of looking up at the dark sky. Thus, in a situation where the other party's background was unclear, Wang Ling felt that it was better to be cautious and make a little more preparations. There were all kinds of magic treasures in his king's treasure house, which he had never used in his previous fights, because no matter how strong a person was, they wouldn't be able to withstand the power of one slap from him. But this time he felt that the time was ripe to use the treasure house. As an excuse for going to the bathroom, Wang Ling had switched identities with his clone Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch. This was the real clone which Wang Ling had left behind at the Office of Strategic Deception, and had its own spiritual intelligence. Grenade-throwing senior immortal called Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch Wang Ling's alternate account. There was nothing wrong with understanding it this way. Now that Wang Ling had to leave for the time being, he thought it was best to leave Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch here. An ordinary clone would directly disintegrate if it was destroyed, but a real clone wouldn't. Besides, Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch was strong enough to protect everyone here if anything unexpected happened. Standing face to face with Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch, Wang Ling felt like he was looking into a mirror, especially after Crispy Noodles had changed into the exact same school uniform as him. There was practically no difference. "I'll leave it to you." Wang Ling lightly patted Crispy Noodles on the shoulder, and then in the next moment he directly disappeared on the spot. This switch looked seamless and flawless, but it turned out that Wang Ling had still underestimated some people's understanding of him. As Wang Ling's real clone, Crispy Noodles had been patiently learning all kinds of business management knowledge in the Office of Strategic Deception recently. Because he was Wang Ling's clone, he wouldn't reveal his identity easily, and always wore a special mask to hide his face. He looked exactly like Wang Ling and could almost be described as twin brothers. If it wasn't for the fact that Crispy Noodles was so submissive, there were times when even grenade-throwing senior immortal would mistake him for someone else. Back then, Wang Ling had left his real clone in the Office of Strategic Deception mainly to help grenade-throwing senior immortal increase the number of people around him as well as a reliable fighting force. A newly established sect would always need a few experts who could dominate the scene. Crispy Noodles was very obedient. He was a clone without any superfluous emotions. Furthermore, according to Wang Ling's instructions, he obeyed all the tasks that grenade-throwing senior immortal gave him. From sect security at the very beginning to business management, staff training, and so on, Crispy Noodles had now become an indispensable HR for new members of the Office of Strategic Deception. This was the first time Crispy Noodles had participated in a field mission like this. After the swap was completed, Crispy Noodles began to return to the camp step by step, based on the memory that Wang Ling had given him, and based on Wang Ling's previous behavior pattern. He walked out of the makeshift toilet and saw that Huagua water curtain groups, cloud dispelling the sun missile, had already been successfully launched in the distance. The missile soared up from the ground, pierced through layers of cloud and fog, and finally dispersed the clouds around Nine Dragon Mountain, allowing the sun to shine down. When the warm light hit Crispy Noodles' face, he somehow felt happy, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help curling up. "Classmate Wang Ling, you." In the distance, Lotus Sun happened to see this scene, and this was the first time she had seen Wang Ling's expression apart from his poker face. "Were you smiling just now, classmate Wang Ling?" She never thought that Wang Ling would actually be so happy to see the sun, and even smile happily. This was something Lotus Sun had never noticed before. She had to write it down in a notebook. Classmate Wang Ling likes the sun. She now finally understood why Wang Ling was sitting in the second-to-last row by the window. Wasn't it to be closer to the sun? Chapter 1193. Realizing that Lotus Sun had noticed him, Crispy Noodles quickly put away his smile. This was the first time he had received an order from Wang Ling for a field mission, and he felt that he had been a little too complacent to actually reveal such a big flaw. Crispy Noodles was well aware that the girl in front of him was the eldest daughter of Huagua Water Curtain Group, and one of the people whom little Master Ling had put on the be on guard against list when he had first entered the school. Crispy Noodles felt that he had miscalculated by revealing a flaw in front of such a person. What should he do? Should he knock her out or physically erase her memory? After careful consideration, Crispy Noodles didn't do it in the end. He might refuse verbally, but there were times when his body was very honest. Crispy Noodles felt that although student Lotus Sun was on the list of people to be on guard against, that didn't necessarily mean that little Master Ling actually hated her. Since he wasn't sure whether she really hated him or not, Crispy Noodles was cautious, and in the end he didn't use a rough method on her. Instead, he used a branch of the 3,000 Great Spells, the Great Memory Spell, to erase the image of his careless smile from the girl's mind. In fact, this was a wake-up call for Crispy Noodles. He had been too complacent just now, and had forgotten for a moment that his task was to swap identities, and that he should maintain little Master Ling's persona as much as possible. As a real clone with spiritual intelligence, Crispy Noodles looked exactly the same as Wang Ling, but there was in fact a certain degree of difference in his personality. He had to pay more attention to this point. As it turned out, while being a substitute looked simple, it also required a lot of acting skills. It actually wasn't easy for Crispy Noodles to blend in with the team, as the differences in souls between people would often manifest themselves at times like this. While it was true that he was Wang Ling's real clone, there were still differences. Early in the morning, everyone in number 60 high school's camp was taking some time to complete their entries for the Body Technique Exchange Meet this time. This was an additional event in the Body Technique Exchange Meet, and the requirement was very simple. They had to complete an essay during the competition to express their true feelings from the perspective of a contestant. The topic could be triggered by a study of each school's body technique duels, friendship, teamwork, as well as tactical analysis and discussion. If they could complete the essay during the survival competition, the team they represented would receive bonus points. Then, based on the essay's content, a professional language teacher would evaluate it, and the 10 best essays would receive bonus points. It didn't matter if they didn't write, since points wouldn't be deducted. But since it was a bonus option, the school would do what it could to participate. For example, number 60 high school's camp, they would be able to complete the bonus essay. Ever since the news that 4 high schools led by Devil Subduing School had been wiped out by number 60 high on Mist Peak, no one in number 60 high's camp had dared offend them. This period of time in the morning was the time when the mind was the clearest, and it was the perfect time for literary creation. As Wang Ling went off to save the world, the task of writing this composition naturally fell to Crispy Noodles. It was mainly because Crispy Noodles saw that everyone was writing. If he didn't go, it would seem like he didn't fit in with the group. Shin Wang Ling. Ling, happy. Everyone formed a circle. When they saw Crispy Noodles coming over, they all moved their butts to make room for a seat just big enough for one person. Crispy Noodles wanted to say thank you at first, but considering that this didn't seem to be in line with little Master Ling's persona, he forced himself to swallow the words of thanks, and then obediently held his knees as he joined in with everyone's creative work. A lot of people were thinking about the topic of their essays. In the past, Wang Ling's habit was to observe everyone's topics before categorizing them, and then choose the side with the most topics to follow suit. For example, if 5 people wrote essays on the theme of friendship, and 3 people wrote essays on the theme of tactical layout, Wang Ling would definitely write an essay on friendship, for the side with more people. This way he could ensure that his essay wouldn't be too eye-catching. When a composition teacher looked at many essays on the same topic, unless you wrote something unique, you wouldn't get a high score. And this was exactly what Wang Ling wanted. But Crispy Noodles actually didn't know about Wang Ling's habit. Seeing that everyone had already picked up their pens to write, he immediately came up with his own topic. As for the title of his essay, it was named Substitute. A lot of people noticed Wang Ling's essay topic and expressed their curiosity. Substitute? Is classmate Wang Ling trying to express some sort of metaphor? Some people were puzzled. Oh my, Wang Ling has actually already come up with a topic. In the past, he's always the last one to write slowly. Super Chin was also surprised. He felt that this wasn't Wang Ling's style, and he had the misconception that Wang Ling had been switched. Substitute? This essay topic is interesting. As the representative for the political science class, Hirogwa felt that he had something to say. In the short essays in the Introduction to Cultivation Ideology class, there were many times when some historical events couldn't be clearly stated, and it was this kind of metaphorical expression that would win the teacher's favor. So Hirogwa almost instantly had his own interpretation of the substitute topic. I know. Classmate Wang Ling wants to express the theme, but it's actually about friendship. Everyone's friendship is irreplaceable. A true friend should be like a substitute, able to lend a helping hand in times of trouble. To help a friend bear the pain together. To share trials and tribulations together. And this is the legendary friendship of substitute messengers. So this was what Wang Ling was trying to say? Everyone nodded when they heard this. At first glance, they felt that Hirogwa's point of view was quite reasonable. In fact, even Crispy Noodles himself hadn't thought that there would actually be this kind of consideration. He had just randomly come up with a topic. Of course, that wasn't the worst part. Just as Crispy Noodles was deciding to write his essay, someone on the other side had actually set up a bet, and this bet was even carried out with himself as the starting point. The two people in the lead were Hirogwa and Super Chin. Come, put down your bets. No one is allowed to go back on their words. Super Chin shouted at the front as he pressed all the talismans he had on the big character. What kind of bet is this? How do we play? Less than 20 is small, more than 21 is big. Some people still didn't quite understand what on earth this meant. To put it bluntly, it's a bet on how many ellipses classmate Wang Ling will have in his essay this time. Chapter 1194. While everyone was struggling over which topic to pick, Wang Ling had already arrived at the coordinates on the other side. The Sun. As a huge and hot gaseous planet in the universe, it had continuously emitted light and heat for about 4.5 billion years. Its surface temperature was nearly 6,000 degrees Celsius, and its core temperature was as high as 15 million degrees Celsius. The most advanced telescopes on Earth had taken pictures of the cell structures on the surface of the Sun, and the cell structures on the surface of each sun were about the size of a French cultivator country. Of course, the true immortal cultivators on Earth could not get close to this place. They could only stay in space for less than 5 minutes. Unless he reached the immortal venerable realm. This was because immortal venerables could activate their second origin energy and absorb the origin energy emitted from the universe as a long-term energy supply. It was for this reason that immortal Jinyuan had wandered the universe for nearly 1,000 years before he found a drought star that humans could remember. However, even if one reached the level of an immortal venerable, they still couldn't get close to some specific celestial bodies. They had no choice but to take a detour while walking in the universe. For example, a star that was as hot as the sun, or a black hole that could even swallow light. Wang Ling. Not affected by the above restrictions. He was a man who could directly approach the sun and the black hole. What he needed to pay attention to was that he had to enchant his clothes before he took action so that they could withstand pressure to a certain extent. Although his body could withstand it, his clothes might not be able to withstand such devastation. When he was a child, he remembered that because his clothes hadn't been enchanted, when he had been infinitely close to the sun, all his clothes had been scorched by the sun. This was a secret Wang Ling kept at the bottom of his heart. In the entire universe, probably only the sun would know. Everything had a spirit, and the sun was no exception. However, the sun spirit was in a deep slumber all year round. The last time it woke up, it saw a naked child wandering in front of it. It was so shocked that the temperature on its surface rose by a few hundred degrees. Now this familiar aura approached once again, directly causing the sun spirit to tremble, once again waking up from its long slumber. There was absolutely no mistake. This aura belonged to the child whose clothes had been burned away by him back then, but whose body remained unscathed. It was just that it hadn't expected Wang Ling to have already grown so big while it had been asleep. But soon the sun spirit realized that something was wrong. It realized that Wang Ling didn't seem to be coming for it. Because on its back, the sun spirit had discovered the figure of another white-haired teenager, who looked exactly like Wang Ling. The sun spirit felt a little confused. The situation had developed in a completely unexpected direction. As a proud sun spirit, there had never been a human who could remain unscathed after being roasted by its core. But after meeting Wang Ling, the sun spirit found itself in complete isolation. And now, before it could fully recover from its isolation, another one had come. Judging from the auras emitted by the two of them, an intense battle was unavoidable. On the back of the sun, a white-haired youngster who looked exactly like Wang Ling was surrounded by a dark halo of light. Ignoring the blazing heat of the sun, he rose into the air. After just one face-to-face encounter with Wang Ling had already determined the outcome of this duel in his heart. Although he didn't know why the youngster in front of him looked exactly like him at such a close distance, he felt that the other party wasn't his match. "Don't be too pleased with yourself, Wang Ling," the white-haired youngster sighed. "I know it's very difficult for me to defeat you given my current battle strength. But..." At that moment, the white-haired youngster turned his gaze to the huge black pillar on the back of the sun. From a distance, it looked like a needle piercing the surface of the golden sun. This was the magic treasure that the white-haired youngster had been preparing for a long time, the phenomena pillar. Ignoring temperature, it could directly probe into the sun's most blazing core. At that moment, the sun spirit finally understood the white-haired youngster's intention. The other party wanted to extract the power of the sun spirit to resonate with the other 8 planets in the solar system. When the last heavenly vein master valve on Earth was opened, the universe refinement array around the solar system would be activated. At that time, all the living creatures in the entire solar system would be devoured by this white-haired youngster. "If I gather the power of the entire solar system, Wang Ling, do you think you'll be my match?" As he said this, the white-haired youngster swept a glance in the direction of the phenomena pillar. The absorption ceremony for the sun spirit that he had painstakingly planned had finally been launched. Although he didn't think he was Wang Ling's match at the moment, as long as he could stall for time until the phenomena pillar absorbed the sun spirit's energy, it was fine. It didn't need to be completely absorbed. 10% was already enough to cooperate with the heavenly vein master valve on Earth to activate the universe refinement array. At that moment, Wang Ling looked around the phenomena pillar and saw that the surface of the sun actually looked like a lush-haired man who had suddenly had his scalp shaved off. The surface, which should have been blazing hot, had actually become bare, and the temperature had plummeted to the point that it was already covered with a layer of frost. This was clearly Whitehair's masterpiece. Even Wang Ling himself hadn't expected that there would actually be someone else apart from him who could be so presumptuous toward the sun spirit. There was no way he would let Whitehair succeed. Wang Ling bent down and charged at the phenomena pillar. His top priority now was to stop the other party from absorbing the sun spirit. The best thing to do was to directly uproot or destroy the phenomena pillar. But if he used magic to destroy it, Wang Ling was worried that it would also cause irreversible damage to the sun's surface. Thus, after careful consideration, Wang Ling felt that it would be better to directly uproot the pillar, which would cause the least damage to the sun and the sun spirit. But contrary to Wang Ling's expectations, Whitehair's movements and reactions were actually as fast as his. The moment Wang Ling made his move, the other party's speed wasn't inferior to his at all. It could almost be said that they were synchronized. This greatly astonished Wang Ling because when he was serious, no one had ever been able to keep up with his movements. "Wang Ling, I'm the only one in the world who can catch up to you," Whitehair said lightly, his face full of confidence. "Is he the same as me?" Wang Ling pondered this in his heart. He had been trying to guess Whitehair's identity. At first, Wang Ling had suspected that Whitehair might be someone who had jumped out of Fate Dao and come from another world. But now Wang Ling had a completely new idea. Furthermore, the answer to this idea was many times more complicated than the version Wang Ling had previously imagined. The next moment, without hesitation, Wang Ling raised his hand and cast a grade 13 spell. This spell was called Galaxy Blast, and it could gather all the meteorites in the vicinity to launch a concentrated bombardment like a meteor shower. But the moment Wang Ling raised his hand to cast the spell, Whitehair actually repeated Wang Ling's actions as if he were looking in a mirror and cast the exact same spell. They raised their hands, made hand seals and cast spells at the same time. The timing was so precise that it could be said to be down to the microsecond. Even the strongest copy-type cultivator on Earth might not be able to do this. But it was precisely because of this that Wang Ling's theory was even more confirmed. There was probably only one answer. This Whitehair in front of him. He was the incarnation of his own shadow. Chapter 1195. Now Wang Ling finally realized the mistake he had been making all this time. Although Wang Ling had already realized through Wang Ming's dream that the person behind the scenes might be related to him in some way, he had been thinking about his parallel universe self, and had neglected the clue right in front of him. That was his shadow. To be exact, this was a shadow that had been separated from his shadow. The other party was very smart. In order to prevent Wang Ling from noticing any flaws, he had deliberately left a small portion of his shadow's power to confuse Wang Ling, so that Wang Ling wouldn't notice the shadow that had been following him all this time. During this time, the other party had been constantly improving his cultivation, and had relied on a big fish devouring small fish method to strengthen himself by continuously devouring other people's shadows. That strange resurrection spell had probably been prepared for this devouring. Wang Ling hadn't expected that even though he had been so cautious, he would actually still be tricked by his own shadow. Since it was his own shadow, Wang Ling immediately decided to give Bai Qi a name, Wang Ying. Sounded like a good name. Don't give me a random name. On the other side, Whitehair heard Wang Ling's thoughts and immediately snorted angrily. He knew that at the same level, neither of them should be able to do anything to the other. That was to say, if Wang Ling hadn't deliberately exposed a flaw in his mind, Whitehair wouldn't have been able to hear his inner voice at all. Thus, Wang Ying immediately understood that Wang Ling had done it on purpose to let him hear this name. What a despicable guy. Did he think that by giving him such a name, he would be able to make him submit? From the moment he had been separated from Wang Ling's body, Wang Ying had already sworn that he would never become anyone's accessory in this lifetime. He was unique. Wang Ling had never thought that one day he would actually fight with his own shadow. This feeling was similar to the left and right mutual combat in Wuxia novels, and was very wonderful. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it an advanced version. Should he use a sealing spell? At that moment, Wang Ling stared at Wang Ying as he thought of a way to deal with him. If he fought with Wang Ying, the other party might also use the same trick. If they fought in front of the sun and damaged the spirit of the sun, it would be a fatal blow to the Earth's environment. So Wang Ling was thinking of using a high-level sealing spell to seal Wang Ying. This was the most gentle method he could think of. But of course, even if Zhang Xin were to use sealing arts, ordinary Heaven's Path divine arts wouldn't work either. Wang Ying knew all of his abilities. No matter what move he used, Wang Ying would perfectly replicate it. Thus this duel was a brainstorm. In the course of the duel, Wang Ling had to use the abilities he had at his disposal to rearrange them and develop a new ability to deal with Wang Ying. It was just like permutations and combinations in mathematics. 4 identical numbers would become brand new numbers after being rearranged and rearranged. What Wang Ling needed to do was to use the new spells he was constantly developing to win. Wang Ling had made up these spells on the spot. Even if Wang Ying knew what kind of ability they were based on, there was no way he could replicate them instantly. There was also a calculation process involved. He planned to take advantage of the time difference to defeat Wang Ying. What, you want to defeat me by designing spells on the spot? Contrary to Wang Ling's expectations, his plan, which he thought would work, was instantly foiled by Wang Ying on the other side. Wang Ling was well aware that this definitely wasn't the ability of the mind-reading ability. Unless they deliberately revealed a flaw, neither of them would be able to read each other's minds. You underestimate me, Wang Ling. I was separated from you. Even if I can't use the mind-reading ability to read your mind, based on my understanding of you, I can still predict what you're thinking. Standing in front of him, Wang Ying's expression was a little bitter and even a little self-deprecating. Have you forgotten? Countless nights while you were learning, I was also growing up with you. I know all of your habits like the back of my hand. Wang Ling's pupils contracted slightly at these words. At the same time, Wang Ling felt that he had indeed underestimated Wang Ying. When all was said and done, Wang Ying was something that had been separated from him. Not only did he have spiritual intelligence, he also had all of his abilities. He was indeed very different from his previous opponents who only knew a few half-baked skills. This was perhaps the first person Wang Ling had met who couldn't be directly defeated with a single slap. But in the next moment, looking at the youngster in front of him, Wang Ling sighed. Following this sigh, Wang Ying suddenly felt the space within a radius of 10,000 feet around him start to shake. A sealing array? How did he do it? Wang Ying was caught off guard by Wang Ling stealthily setting up an array. He tried hard to predict Wang Ling's array, but he couldn't tell what kind of ability it was using. Apart from that sigh at the very beginning, Wang Ling didn't move at all. He just stood there without making any hand seals, and there weren't even any fluctuations of spirit power emanating from his body. But this array had been set up just like that. It was a brand new array. At least in Wang Ying's memory as a shadow, he had never seen such an array. In a split second, the surface of the blazing sun was divided into a square chessboard. Countless stars gathered and moved like chess pieces on the chessboard, and the center of the chessboard was clearly divided into 2 spaces, one yin and one yang. Standing where yin and yang met, Wang Ling didn't even bat an eyelid. The chess pieces above the chessboard, which had been arranged from the stars, rumbled and exploded, and one by one, they actually moved in Wang Ying's direction. This was a new move that Wang Ling had developed by combining a variety of spells. When the chess pieces collided with each other, the target that was hit would instantly be sealed. The power of this move was already comparable to that of a level 14 spell. It was extraordinarily powerful. However, just as the chess piece was about to hit Wang Ying, the chess piece that was originally moving at an extremely fast speed suddenly stopped. A chessboard that was also 10,000 feet wide formed under Wang Ying's feet. Wang Ling felt a force resisting him, and his chess piece was forced to stop moving. Heavenly Tao chessboard plus star shifting array plus all creation dust. Although it had taken some time to calculate, Wang Ying had in the end figured out the formula for this brand new sealing spell. Wang Ling hadn't expected such a quick calculation. It looked like a simple combination wouldn't fool Wang Ying. He had to design some more complicated spells. Chapter 1196. He combined the Heavenly Tao chessboard, the star-shifting array and the 10,000 forms dust to form a new level 14 sealing spell, which Wang Ling called Heavenly Dust Star-Shifting Chess. When the chess pieces collided and hit their target, the power of the seal, which was formed by the coexistence of yin and yang, was enough to crush any living creature in the solar system. However, this simple arrangement clearly didn't work on Wang Ying. The other party's calculation speed was far faster than Wang Ling had imagined. But the battle had just begun, and Wang Ling wasn't flustered by his failure. Given that he possessed a variety of great Tao powers, he had enough confidence in any battle. The most important thing was that this duel with Wang Ying would take place in outer space. They would be fighting far away from Earth, and even if they went all out, they wouldn't harm the innocent. It was precisely because of this that Wang Ling was exceptionally patient. Since Wang Ying had been separated from his body, Wang Ling felt that it was necessary to use this battle to clearly investigate the cause of Wang Ying's formation. All this time, Wang Ling had neglected his own shadow. He had never thought that his shadow would actually grow up with him, gradually develop spiritual intelligence, and even have the thought of separating from his body. Wang Ling, you'd better not underestimate my deductive ability. There may not be an obvious difference between you and me, but my calculation is definitely above yours. Wang Ling's expression froze slightly at Wang Ying's words. He was wondering if there was any difference between him and Wang Ying apart from the color of their hair. As for his mathematical ability, Wang Ling didn't think he was too bad at it. At the very least, he had a clear idea of how to solve problems, and could come up with dozens of different solutions in 1 second. For Wang Ling, the only difficulty was how to make his mistakes less obvious when answering the questions. As for Wang Ying's claim that his calculation ability was above his, Wang Ling put on an expression that said he was eager to hear the details. The next second, Wang Ling heard Wang Ying's sole question. Wang Ling, let me ask you. Do you know how many crispy noodle snacks you've eaten until today? To be honest, Wang Ling was stunned by this question. Because no one would deliberately calculate how many crispy noodle snacks they had eaten. I've already expected you to use this method of rearranging spells to deal with me. So I've been training my calculation ability and patience since a long time ago. I clearly remember every crispy noodle snack you've eaten. Wang Ying's gaze revealed a determined look. You are 16 years old this year. You ate a total of 36,872 packets of crispy noodle snacks. On average, you have to eat 6 packets a day. Sometimes you have to eat 20 packets a day. Wang Ling, do you know Wang Ling? Wang Ying smiled bitterly. I know you better than you do. Wang Ling was silent. He was indeed speechless. At first, he thought that his shadow was just a repeater that had all the abilities he knew. But he never expected that Wang Ying was not only a repeater, but also the legendary Lord Counter. But thanks to Wang Ying, he finally knew how many packets of crispy noodle snacks he had eaten. Opponents usually die from talking too much. During Wang Ying's nagging, Wang Ling had already figured out a new way to attack. He knew that the ultimate goal of Wang Ying's incessant chatter in front of him was to stall for time, so that the plenitude elephant's pillar would have enough time to extract the spirit power of the sun spirit. But Wang Ying no longer had a chance. His next move would definitely determine his victory. All along, many people had been pursuing the power of Great Tao. This so-called power of Great Tao was the supreme magical power that could reach heaven and earth. Take Heavenly Tao for example. There were 3,000 Heavenly Tao in a universe, and they were combined into the 3,000 Heavenly Tao. Many cultivators on Earth might only be able to comprehend one of the 3,000 Heavenly Tao after searching for hundreds or even thousands of years. A large part of the reason why the power of Tao was so difficult to reach was that Tao contained an ever-changing power, just like the genetic sequences in the evolutionary process of living things, which had trillions of permutations and combinations. Only through constant learning and combined with a certain amount of luck could one have the opportunity to combine the genetic sequences of the 3,000 heavenly Tao. And this process could take a cultivator a very long time. The next moment Wang Ling attacked again. Like before, he didn't make any hand seals, nor did his body move much. It was yet another flawless execution of the sealing technique. The confusing effect of the sealing technique was excellent. This was because the opponent would never know when the attack would begin, and wouldn't even be able to see through the other party's hand seals to see what kind of technique he was using. Wang Ying narrowed his eyes and did his best to distinguish Wang Ling's technique. He was observing Wang Ling's micro-expressions, and based on his familiarity with Wang Ling, he was able to predict his next move. Facial paralysis was also capable of micro-expressions. Sometimes, even a tiny blink of the eye could contain a huge amount of information. Wang Ling was still inspired by the stars in the universe for this move, but he had fused far more spells than the first time. He had only fused 3 moves the first time, but in the end Wang Ying had swiftly deduced everything. This time, Wang Ling didn't believe that Wang Ying would be able to see through the 30 moves he had fused together so quickly. When Wang Ying was surrounded by thousands of meteorites, he felt as if his body had become the center of gravity. Each of these meteorites fluttering in the sky was like a magnet as they rushed toward him in an endless stream. As Wang Ying did his best to escape the gravitational pull of the meteorites, he wondered what kind of spell Wang Ling was using. In less than a few seconds, Wang Ying actually felt his body become heavier and heavier. If this went on, he would definitely lose this battle. When the thousands of meteorites crashed into him like a tidal wave, Wang Ying gradually became lost in them, and finally sank into oblivion. Did it work? Wang Ling stared at the scene in front of him. He saw that Wang Ying had already been completely buried. This was a new grade 15 spell that he had come up with. It could transform any living creature into a star core. Once the transformation was complete, all the meteorites in the universe would approach the star core and converge into a sphere, which would grow bigger and bigger under the influence of the endless gravitational pull, like a greedy snake. The most important thing was that as the meteorites converged and grew in size, the person who had been transformed into the star core would also be under the same pressure. In the end, they would completely turn into a whole new planet, and be trapped inside it forever. Looking at the result, Wang Ying was probably trapped. Was that all there was to it? Wang Ling sighed in his heart as he stared at the brand new planet that had been formed from an endless stream of meteorites. But in the next moment, the sphere, which had originally been motionless in front of him, suddenly split open at the top with a loud boom. "Wang Ling, I won't be abandoned by you again." Wang Ying's voice came out of the crack. "I've been your shadow for so long. This time I'm going to turn you into my shadow forever." Chapter 1197. Wang Ying's strength was astonishing. At least it was far more terrifying than Wang Ling had imagined. With his own strength, he had broken free of the star core and carved out a bloody path while surrounded by so many meteorites, seeking a slim chance of survival. There were no words to describe or evaluate this kind of technique that relied purely on physical strength, because it didn't require any skill at all. Wang Ling didn't make a move, but waited for the other party's next move. The scene seemed to be in a stalemate. If anyone had been watching, they would definitely have huge doubts about the outcome of the battle. This kind of doubt was as thought-provoking as why Kuxuan was so short. On the other side, Wang Ying, who had broken free by relying purely on his physical strength, was surrounded by several layers of faint black light. This was the holy body halo of a sage. Wang Ling's halo was pure white, which was the complete opposite of Wang Ying's. When the holy body halo circled around Wang Ying like a star ring, the meteorites within 100 zhang of Wang Ying were actually attracted by the power of the holy body halo, and then split apart little by little until they were completely shattered. This was the invulnerability circle brought about by the holy body halo. It could automatically clear away all flying objects, hidden weapons, spells and so on within a range of 100 zhang. Wang Ling had always been suppressing his holy body halo to prevent it from showing. Because if he lost control of his halo, it wouldn't just be clearing away flying objects, but also erasing all living things in the surrounding space. Even for the current Wang Ying, he was holding back on his halo, opening it to less than 10%. This was because he still had to take care of the myriad elephants pillar below him. Once it was completely open to 100%, a large chunk of the myriad elephants pillar below and the surface of the sun would immediately be bitten off and directly disappear from space. It could only be said that as expected of his own shadow. Looking at this scene, Wang Ling's eyes were unexpectedly filled with pleasant surprise. It had been a long time since he had met someone who could take a beating like this. Wang Ying had replicated almost all of his heavenly Dao abilities. But from Wang Ying's attack just now, Wang Ling could actually see some drawbacks. Almost all the spells he had created previously had been based on heavenly Dao. Assuming that Wang Ying had been separated from Wang Ling a long time ago, Wang Ying might not have been able to master the new abilities he had obtained after separation. Although he had very cautiously left a small part of his shadow on Wang Ling to prevent Wang Ling from noticing it was missing, there was a limit to how much it could learn. Thus, based on this scenario, Wang Ling felt that the opportunity to clinch victory had arrived. As long as he used the power of the divine Dao, he might be able to make Wang Ying reveal a flaw. However, at that moment, a sly smile appeared on Wang Ying's face. He opened his hand and a long string of black shadows condensed in his palm. In the end, they gradually solidified. First, they revealed a pitch-black sword hilt, and then they slowly materialized into a sword god. The sword was black all over, but despite the difference in color, Wang Ling could still tell at a glance that it was Jinka's shadow. Not only had Wang Ying escaped from him, it had actually stolen Jinka's shadow along with it. What a beast! But at that moment, staring at the rampant Wang Ying in front of him, Wang Ling actually secretly rejoiced. He thought to himself that it was a good thing that the opponent hadn't attacked Crispy Noodles' shadow. If even the shadow of the Crispy Noodle snack was stolen, then the Crispy Noodle snack would no longer be complete. Wang Ling, I know what you're thinking. I know you're thinking about using the divine Dao to deal with me, but unfortunately, I'm afraid your wish will come to nothing. Indeed, I haven't fully mastered the power of the divine Dao. But you must always remember that I'm your shadow. Wang Ying's voice rang out. Shadows exist to imitate. If you dare use the divine Dao, I'll be able to learn it in an instant. At that time I'll become even stronger. Saying this, Wang Ying pointed that pitch-black Jinka straight at Wang Ling. I told you, I want you to become my shadow. Shadow counterattack. Wang Ying definitely wasn't just saying this. Wang Ling could sense that Wang Ying was serious. In fact, this was also a gamble for Wang Ying. He had paid such a huge price to set up the universe refining array in an attempt to absorb the power of all the living beings in the entire solar system in order to have enough power to fight Wang Ling. That was right. So Wang Ying's ultimate goal was to counterattack. He wanted Wang Ling to devour him and thus become his shadow. Now there was still one crucial step to complete this plan, and that was to wait until the myriad elephant's pillar had absorbed enough power from the sun spirit. Wang Ying had once imagined what kind of attitude and expression he would show when he saw Wang Ling. In the end, it turned out that Wang Ying was even more excited than he had imagined. He already couldn't wait for the myriad elephant's pillar to absorb enough energy, as his entire body was already boiling over. According to his original plan, if he used the universe refining array, his success rate in devouring Wang Ling would be 99%. Although his current success rate wasn't that high, it was still at least 80%. Thus, Wang Ying decided to give it a try first to see if he could devour Wang Ling. Hee. With a frivolous laugh, Wang Ying swung his black sword at Wang Ling. At first, Wang Ying only created a small sword wave when he waved his sword. However, the moment the sword wave was pushed out, it instantly expanded like a surging tsunami, forming a huge sword wave that was tens of thousands of feet wide. The wild sword chi caused Wang Ling's figure to sway slightly. Wang Ling started to rejoice that he had had the foresight to enchant his school uniform and pants before he had set off. Otherwise, under the power of this sword, all his clothes would have been stripped bare. Do you think it's over just like that? I didn't even use 10% of my strength in that attack just now. Wang Ying was especially confident in his attack. He quickly changed his position, and each time he did, he slashed at Wang Ling with his sword. Huge sword waves from all directions rushed toward Wang Ling, who was in the center, forming a huge convection that seemed to trap Wang Ling in the middle and prevent him from moving. This power was indeed astonishing. Wang Ling was already certain that less than 10% of his strength could have such an effect. But in the center of the sword chi, Wang Ling stretched his muscles and bones. 10% of the sword chi was still a little too weak. There was no way it could trap him. Seeing this, Wang Ying reacted quickly and launched a second round of attacks. To devour Wang Ling, he had to first imprison him, just like a giant python swallowing its prey. The prey had to give up struggling for a short while, thus leaving enough time for the shadow to devour. 100% sword Dao. This time Wang Ying didn't hold back. He had wanted to save some energy for when he devoured Wang Ling. But now he had decided to show off. he would reserve his strength to immobilize Wang Ling first. The sword pressure created by the 100% power of the sword Dao was destructive. Any living creature trapped within would be torn to pieces. Only Wang Ling would be safe and sound. Is it already 100%? That's right. This was 100%. Awesome, right? However, after confirming that Wang Ying had used 100% of his sword principle, Wang Ling's face showed deep disappointment, and two words involuntarily popped up in his heart. That's it. Chapter 1198. Although Wang Ying relied on the characteristics of the shadow to imitate all of Wang Ling's abilities, there was a fundamental difference in their personalities. What Wang Ling felt most from this fight was Wang Ying's confidence, which he didn't know where it came from. Overconfidence in one's own strength would often cause one to fall into an unknown predicament. But while it wasn't enough for Wang Ling to use all of its strength as his own shadow, it was still stronger than most people on Earth. Wang Ying thought that his sword pressure had firmly suppressed Wang Ling, and his body immediately started to turn into a shadow as he tried to envelop and devour Wang Ling. Like a black hole, the huge black shadow turned into ferocious claws that lunged at Wang Ling to devour him. At this time, Wang Ying still did not realize that his situation was not good. During the fight, Wang Ying had kept his distance from Wang Ling the entire time so that Wang Ling wouldn't have any chance to get close to him. He knew Wang Ling too well. If he got close, it might be easier for him to find an opportunity. At that moment, the devouring shadow rushed over from a distance and ruthlessly pounced on Wang Ling. Wang Ying was secretly delighted when he saw that Wang Ling couldn't even open his eyes under the enormous pressure of his sword. But in fact, the main reason he had closed his eyes was because he was accumulating power. The universe was vast. In the previous two duels, the main reason why Wang Ling had reorganized his spells and used them for long-range attacks was because Wang Ying had been cautious. In fact, he had thought of an excellent way to capture Wang Ying during the previous fight. However, due to the distance, he had to lure Wang Ying into his effective attack range. Just as the endless black shadows turned into a round black hole to swallow him, Wang Ling realized that his best chance to make a move had come. In the next moment, Wang Ling opened his eyes, and the three-petaled golden Dao lotus of the king's eye overflowed from his pupils, instantly creating a tremendous suppressive force. In an instant, everything in the universe seemed to be frozen at this moment. Even Wang Ying, who was trying to devour, could not move. At this moment, he saw an illusion of silence. At this moment, Wang Ying finally realized his mistake. He thought he had copied everything about Wang Ling, however, he had never possessed this pair of king's eyes. The king's eye couldn't be duplicated, unless he could personally pluck it out of Wang Ling. But this was easier said than done. What is this? Wang Ying was dumbfounded. The situation was beyond his expectations. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be anything in this world that couldn't be replicated as a shadow. Wang Ling knew that from the moment Wang Ying revealed this expression, the outcome had already been decided. His king's eye couldn't be replicated. Even Wang Ling himself felt it was very strange. This was because the king's eye wasn't part of Dao, and wasn't a derivative of any great Dao. It was something that Wang Ling was born with, but he didn't know where it had come from. It was also the only object on Wang Ling's side that wasn't part of Dao. The king's eye had many abilities. Powerful suppressive force, removing the false from the real, transcending illusions, freezing space and so on. If necessary, he could also destroy everything within his line of sight. The closer he was to his opponent, the more he could unleash the power of the king's eye. One of the limitations of the king's eye was its range. But it was mainly because he could suppress the power of the king's eye, especially when the talisman seal was still active. At the moment, the king's eye's power was less than 5%. Naturally, the range was only 5%. It's over. Wang Ling stared at Wang Ying. Using the power of the king's eye to remove the false from the real, he condensed the huge black shadow in front of him into Wang Ying's appearance. To be honest, Wang Ying had indeed been a little anxious when he attacked. If he had used the universe refining array to fight him, Wang Ling felt that the other party would have had a chance to touch him. But unfortunately, there were no ifs. However, was Wang Ying really panicking? Wang Ling felt that there might be another reason for this. Whose idea was this? Wang Ling asked Wang Ying at that moment. Although Wang Ying was indeed anxious to get rid of him as his own shadow, Wang Ling believed that Wang Ying's thoughts wouldn't be so evil. Thus, it definitely wasn't Wang Ying who could think of sacrificing the lives of the entire solar system to draw enough power for himself. On the other hand, although Wang Ying seemed anxious to attack, he had probably already anticipated this situation. It wasn't anyone's idea. Wang Ying turned his head, his white hair drenched in sweat. Beads of sweat peeled off his body and flew into the starry sky, before finally quickly condensing into ice particles that dissipated along with the dust. Wang Ling pursed his lips. Although he couldn't read Wang Ying's mind, he had enough patience. When you merge with me again, I'll still know. Wang Ling looked at the white hair in front of him and said in a low voice, but I want to hear you say it yourself. You. This time it was Wang Ying who fell silent. As a shadow, Wang Ying felt that he had always been neglected. He was trying his best to get rid of Wang Ling, but in the end, it was to prove his existence. He thought for a long time. In the end, Wang Ying still gave his hint. Behind the void gate, some things could be said and some things couldn't. Wang Ling knew that this was probably all that Wang Ying knew. At that moment, Wang Ying laughed bitterly. Erase me, it's really tiring to be your shadow? Is that what you really mean? Wang Ling asked. He saw the youngster's evasive expression. After a few seconds, Wang Ling stretched out his arm and grasped the youngster's hand. In that instant, Wang Ying's entire body scattered, and like a plate of quicksand or a stream, he slowly merged with Wang Ling again. What astonished Wang Ying was that not only hadn't Wang Ling completely erased him, he had even retained all his intelligence and memories. The moment before he returned to Wang Ling's body, Wang Ying's eyes widened in disbelief. Aren't you afraid that I'll run away again? Wang Ling shook his head lightly. Even if you run away, I'll catch you and bring you back. The moment Wang Ying returned to Wang Ling's body, Wang Ling gave him his answer in his heart. After getting rid of Wang Ying, Wang Ling's last step was to remove the phenomena pillar stuck in the Sun Spirit's body. The moment Wang Ling used his spirit power to move the omniscient phenomenon pillar away, the Sun Spirit felt his breathing instantly become smoother. He looked at Wang Ling in awe, but more than that, he trembled. Is this a fight between immortals? Wang Ling recalled the last hint Wang Ying had given him. The source of all this had a lot to do with the void gate that Master Li Shaokai had wanted to break through back then. Do you know what's behind the void gate? Wang Ling asked the Sun Spirit at that moment. The Sun Spirit had been alive for billions of years, and Wang Ling felt that the Sun Spirit might be able to tell him the answer he wanted. The Sun Spirit was lost in thought at this question. After a long while, the Sun Spirit's hollow voice rang out. Behind the void gate is emptiness. Chapter 1199. Wang Ling pulled out the omniscient elephant pillar stuck in the Sun Spirit's body, and the pitch-black pillar instantly shrank to the size of a toothpick in his hand. Using the power of the King's Eye to search repeatedly, Wang Ling realized that he couldn't find the corresponding material to cast this omniscient elephant pillar in any of the 10 universes. Wang Ling was secretly astonished. Like his King's Eye, this pillar wasn't part of Tao. Pinching the shrunken pillar between two fingers, he carefully pondered what the Sun Spirit had just said. Behind the void gate is emptiness. Then what on earth was this emptiness? There was no lack of people in this world who felt empty. Sometimes even Wang Ling himself would feel completely empty. Could it be that the person who lived behind the void gate was also an expert who stood in an invincible place like him, and often felt lonely and empty? But this was just Wang Ling's speculation. If he wanted an answer, he would have to open the void gate and find out. You're very strong. At that moment, the hollow voice of the Sun Spirit, which was like that of a benevolent old man, rang out in the air once again. As a cosmic spirit that had lived for billions of years, the Sun Spirit had its own ideas and insights. I've lived for billions of years. Compared to me, all the cultivators on Earth are but a drop in the ocean. No human can live for billions of years. But in the entire universe, I'm just like an ant. Anyone who enters the void gate will die. Perhaps this isn't a place you can set foot in. What surprised Wang Ling was that the Sun Spirit, who never nagged, was actually saying so much to warn him. What magic treasure is this? Wang Ling asked as he pinched the thin black needle in his hand. He had been studying it for a long time, but still couldn't figure out what it was. This is a void object derived from the void gate. If even you can't figure it out, then that's enough to prove that what's behind the void gate isn't something you can touch. The Sun Spirit's tone was very indifferent when it said this, but in its heart, it was secretly glad that Wang Ling had actually suffered a setback. The truth was that as the Sun Spirit, it didn't know what on earth was behind the void gate, nor did it know whether Wang Ling would die if he stepped into the void gate. However, in the long river of history, the Sun Spirit had witnessed too many creatures who had tried to cross the void gate and died. This was not a legend, but an existence on par with the gate between worlds and the gate of the heavenly Tao. So far, the void gate was the only one he hadn't seen yet. Behind the gate between worlds was the demon realm. This was an artificial door designed by immortal Jinyuan. Because it wasn't stable, it often appeared on Earth without permission and brought disaster. The Gate of Heavenly Dao led directly to the Heavenly Dao Governing Committee, where the 6 great Heavenly Dao were located. As a whitelist user, every time Wang Ling went there, it was like returning home. Judging from this, Wang Ling felt that the Void Gate might also be connected to another world. It was just that this Void Gate looked especially low-key. If there really was some kind of advanced creature inside, then Wang Ling felt that it was indeed low-key enough. Perhaps it was because he was too strong so he felt disdain? But these were just his speculations. Although he was curious about the Void Gate, it hadn't disturbed his normal life thus far, nor had it disturbed him from eating his crispy noodle snacks. Thus, Wang Ling couldn't take the initiative to open the Void Gate. It wasn't that he couldn't open it, but that he didn't think it would be too violent to tear down someone else's door without a proper reason. As for this omniscient elephant pillar which the Sun Spirit had defined as an object of the void, Wang Ling felt that it would be better to return it at the right time. After all, it belonged to someone else. It was Friday, November 21st, the 7th day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition, and there was still one day left until the end. Wang Ling and Crispy Noodle Snacks exchanged their identities in the temporary toilet set up by No. 60 High's camp. After confirming the time, Wang Ling realized that when he and Wang Ying had fought in space, 3 days had already passed on Earth. This was probably the aftereffect of the King's Eye's ability to stop time. Stopping time in an area would result in a time difference with the outside world. It was just that Wang Ling hadn't thought too much about it at the time. He was just glad that he hadn't stopped time for too long, otherwise he might have directly graduated from high school, and this book would have come to an end at that time. After a full 7 days, it was already the final moment to decide the winner. When Wang Ling came out of the toilet, he found that everyone else from the other schools had already left. Crispy Noodle Snacks had compiled a memory chain of everything that had happened during this period of time and transmitted it to Wang Ling. Little Silver, Loopy Toad and Wang Jin's mission had gone very smoothly. All the flowers of the living dead in the stalactite cave which had been pregnant with the embryo had been completely destroyed. They had rescued Old Huang, and the fake Old Huang had been taken down by President Qi and Ajua in one fell swoop. Of all the experts who had been resurrected, only Li Xiaokai's master Li Huanran and Jiang Yingyue had survived. Li Huanran's existence was beneficial to the study of the Void Gate. At the same time, Jiang Yingyue would be an excellent witness to the chaos this time. President Qi needed her as a witness to report to the head of state. Of course, the main reason why Jiang Yingyue had survived was because of Mother Wang. That evil remnant, who had pretended to be Mother Wang and used Numinous Mother to swindle people everywhere, was everyone's next target. After grenade-throwing Senior Immortal actively communicated with Huaxiao Alliance, they decided to issue a worldwide arrest warrant after verifying the relevant details. On the other side, on the 6th day of the competition, the camps formed by the schools broke up after they divided up the resources they had obtained during the alliance period. The schools who were still alive agreed to avoid fighting in the following day, and made a gentleman's oath. If someone from a school broke the rules and launched a sneak attack on another school in advance, they would be despised by all the other schools. Although it was said that all was fair in a competition, if someone broke the oath to win the championship, they would be despised by everyone even if they did. Now, the 7th day had arrived, and it was also the deadline for the gentleman's oath. Wang Ling looked at the numbers displayed on the domed mountain. Now all the schools added up had less than 80 people left. Wang Ling took stock of the remaining people from No. 60 High School. Good heavens, not a single person from No. 60 High School had left. Of the less than 80 people left, their No. 60 High School accounted for close to 10% of them. In contrast, the other schools seemed to be in a more tragic state. Take the previous favorites for the championship as an example. Number of people remaining from South Sea Sky High School, 4. Number of people remaining from Titan High School, 3. Number of people remaining from Balance Flame High School, 1. In contrast, No. 60 High School was as steady as an old dog. Chapter 1200. No. 60 High's overwhelming advantage in numbers might seem like a good thing, but in Wang Ling's view, it was actually pushing No. 60 High into the teeth of the storm. Checks and balances were important in a large-scale competition. When the other schools saw that No. 60 High was still at full strength, they might form an alliance again in the last 2 days to get rid of No. 60 High first. In fact, Wang Ling's worries soon became reality. Apart from us, there are 11 surviving schools out of the remaining 60-odd people. They've already received reliable information, and have decided to send one person each to form a vanguard coalition army to encircle and annihilate us first. At noon, Lotus Sun explained the current situation to everyone through Mysterious Ocean's holographic water map. After the schools learned that number 60 High was still at full strength, led by the perception-type expert Nanishio, they immediately formed a coalition army of 11 people in an attempt to launch an attack on number 60 High. It didn't necessarily have to be a one-for-one exchange. Even if number 60 High lost some members, that would still be good. This is the critical stage. The final score of the competition will be calculated based on accumulated points, survival points, and bonus points. In the early and middle stages of the competition, everyone will cooperate with each other to survive, so there shouldn't be a lot of points for each school. But if we can rely on our numerical advantage to hold on, our number 60 High will gain a huge advantage in terms of survival points, and even win directly. Lotus Sun said confidently. Survival points were the most important factor. When the final tally of the survival battle came on the 8th day, points would be calculated based on the final number of people in each school's delegation. One person who survived would get an extra 100 points. If number 60 High didn't lose any members by the last day, they would be able to pull away from the other schools by a large margin. Compared with accumulating points in battle, this was the fastest way. While Lotus Sun was discussing the battle plan, Wang Zhen, Gu Xuanji and the others were bored to death as they stared at the sky. There was almost no suspense in this competition for number 60 High. It was almost the last day, but number 60 High actually hadn't lost a single person. This actually felt a little unreal. They had come to learn how to act from Wang Ling, but their acting wasn't even real at all. Thus, the following conversation took place in an independent mental space. Jinyuan hissed. Isn't our acting too fake? It's almost over, but no one has fallen? Gu Xuanji nodded and couldn't agree more with Jinyuan's point of view. Venerated Immortal is right. I also think it's a little fake. Why don't someone demonstrate how to make your death more natural? Lu Qingyi quickly came up with a plan. This Wang Zhen is really good. Wang Zhen. Thus, just as Lotus Sun's side came up with a plan to deal with the enemy, Wang Zhen started to drag Lu Qingyi and the others along to jump off the cliff. This was the plan that Gu Xuanji and the others had discussed together. If number 60 High really won the championship by a large margin, it might be a little like attracting hatred. Thus, Gu Xuanji calculated that if the four of them withdrew from the competition now, not only would they help the other schools save some face, they would also narrow the gap and help number 60 High win the competition by a small margin. Of course, if they were to jump too directly, it would seem like they were going easy on him, so it was crucial to act realistically. The leap of faith was a very romantic thing, especially when a man and a woman were together. It gave off a special feeling. Thus, on the evening of the 7th day, the vanguard force of the number 60 High Must Die Alliance, which consisted of the remaining 11 schools led by South Sea Sky High and Titan High, received new news. The message was simple. On number 60 High's side, 4 people had been killed. Nanishio's first reaction when he heard the news was naturally a black face full of question marks. Their premeditated attack hadn't even started yet, so how could 4 people be dead? I heard that in the beginning, someone fell off the cliff while gathering spirit fruit, and the people behind him went to catch him, but in the end, they were all taken down. Are they all right? They triggered the golden light shield. What could possibly happen to them? For some reason, Nanishio didn't seem very happy when he heard this news. Instead, he sensed a conspiracy. He was the leader of this vanguard force, and had originally planned to launch a sneak attack on number 60 High's camp that night, mainly because number 60 High was currently at full strength, which was very disadvantageous to the other schools. But now that 4 people had died all at once, there was actually no need to organize this operation in theory. Apart from Nanishio himself, the other 11 people in number 60 High's vanguard team had been carefully selected to represent the middle combat strength of each school, which was also very crucial right now. Number 60 High's numbers were basically the same as those of the senior schools, so there was indeed no need to take any more risks. But Nanishio still felt that there was something fishy about this. He had spent 6 days with the people from number 60 High. Number 60 High's overall combat strength wasn't outstanding, and the school's overall combat strength was in the middle of the pack. Student Lotus Sun was indeed very good, but in a team game, one person's excellence was useless. At that moment, a drop of rain landed on the tip of Nanishio's nose, and then exploded. Nanishio raised his head and suddenly realized that it was actually drizzling. This kind of weather was actually extremely disadvantageous for a sneak attack. Although they were already here, there really didn't seem to be any need for a sneak attack. They hadn't even made a move, but 4 people from number 60 high had already died. But in the next moment, Nan Ishio's expression changed dramatically. Not good. What's wrong? We've fallen into a trap. Nan Ishio's eyes lit up at that moment as he realized that there was a great danger here. Unfortunately, it was already too late. In the dense mountain forest in the distance, several beams of golden light shield had already shot up into the sky. It's over, it's all over. Nan Ishio looked at the increasing number of golden beams of light, unable to hide the despair on his face. No matter how much he had calculated, he had overlooked the important factor of the weather. Lotus Sun, who had already awakened a sword spirit, especially in a rainy operation, and her mysterious sea sword would almost give her an absolute advantage. It was like fighting on her home ground. She could borrow the power of the rain to identify each person's position, and then remotely control sword chi to take them down one by one. It might be difficult for Lotus Sun to do this on her own, but number 60 high's camp still had 6 people. In addition, Lotus Sun had used the various materials they had collected in the coalition army a few days ago, and combined them with her own pill-making machine to quickly refine elixirs that could replenish spirit chi. In this heavy rain, Lotus Sun could practically do whatever she wanted. It could only be said that as expected of the young miss of Huagua Water Curtain Group and the captain of number 60 high, she could actually scheme to this extent. Chapter 1201. No one had expected Lotus Sun to take advantage of the heavy rain to use the power of mysterious sea sword spirit to wield sword chi from a distance to destroy the enemy, although in the end, not everyone was eliminated. On the 8th day there were 12 people left on the field. Number 60 high had 6. The other 6 were Nan Ishio from South Sea Sky High, 4 Eyes, who had been with Wang Zhen earlier, Zhu Hanyun from Titan High, junior sister Yen Xiaochun from the same school, Tang Jingze from number 59 high, and Yi Jiang, the team leader from Sword God Academy. Number 60 high's team knew more or less about the others, but they were curious about Yi Jiang's background. What kind of school is Sword God Academy? Super Chin rubbed his head, feeling confused. I think an uncle mentioned it to me before. It's a newly established cultivation high school in Jinghua City. I didn't expect such a young school to have someone in the national competition for the first time, but I don't know who this Yi Jiang is. There were too many students participating in the competition, and even uncles like Dopigwa couldn't remember every single one of them clearly. The point was that Sword God Academy wasn't on Headmaster Chen's list of precautions to begin with. Now that someone had suddenly broken out of the encirclement, the contestants from all the schools were taken aback. If the competition hadn't started yet, Hirogwa might have been able to find out Yi Jiang's identity through other means. But now that they were in a competition, even if he had a way out of the ring, he couldn't use it openly. In the command center, old Huang sipped hot tea. He was wrapped in a thick cotton quilt, which was a special magic treasure that could dispel the cold and strengthen one's body. This was the real old Huang. Previously, he had been trapped in the cold pool in the stalactite cave, and his entire body had been frozen. Teacher, are you feeling better? President Chi asked concernedly. I'm already a lot better. Old Huang gazed at Yi Jiang on the screen. By the way, could this person be? Teacher, you're absolutely right. President Chi nodded with a smile. Sword God Academy students naturally specialized in swordsmanship, and the team leader was surnamed Yi. How many people in the world of swordsmanship could compete with this Yi Jiang? Elder Huang studied Yi Jiang's appearance carefully. Then he frowned and shook his head slightly. He transmitted his voice. He doesn't look like him. Also, I remember that Yi Jianchuan is a 1,000-year-old virgin who doesn't have a wife. When did he have such a big son? He's not his own. President Chi smiled and replied telepathically. This old Huang from next door? Elder Huang was astonished. Teacher, you think too much. This is a child that old Yi picked up more than 10 years ago. It is said that he was born with a sword bone. He saw that he was a promising talent, so he adopted him as his son. So that was how it was. Old Huang was relieved. Now all the doubts in his heart were resolved. In the middle of the 7th night, Lotus Sun's sword rain baptism had directly eliminated most of the people. Among the many split screens in front of him, old Huang immediately recognized Yi Jiang in the corner. At that time, Yi Jiang had been sitting alone on the cliff, his pure white school uniform swaying in the wind. He hadn't brandished any magic artifacts, and had only plucked a handful of grass from the ground to fuse his sword intent into it. He had used the power of the grass to form a powerful sword screen, which had withstood mysterious sea sword rain baptism. No one would have thought that on the last day of the competition, there would actually be a batch of dark horses like this. It was Saturday, November 22nd, the 8th day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition. After a discussion among the surviving students, everyone unanimously decided that the final battle would be a one-on-one duel on the Round Top Mountain. The opponents would be decided by drawing lots. How about we write the names of all the people from number 60 high on a piece of paper, and the 6 of you each draw one? Nan Ishio suggested. The 6 of you want to challenge the 6 of us from number 60 high? Then why don't we write your names together? Super Chin felt that this was unfair. A one-on-one duel was already the biggest concession number 60 high could make. Otherwise, given the current situation, number 60 high could completely attack as a group and defeat them one by one. There was no need for them to fight on the Round Top Mountain at all. The reason why Lotus Sun had agreed to the one-on-one duel was actually because she had followed Headmaster Chen's instructions. There was no other reason, and the main reason was to leave the other school some face and hope. If they really fought them as a group, the chances of the other schools winning were minuscule. Furthermore, a one-on-one duel would make the competition more enjoyable to watch, and Lotus Sun especially liked this feeling. But in the end, this wasn't something Super Chen could decide, and he had to listen to Lotus Sun's instructions when leading the team. One-on-one is fine. The victory of this competition is destined to belong to number 60 high. If this can convince you, that's fine too. This decision wasn't because Lotus Sun was too arrogant and conceited, but because she truly had confidence in everyone from number 60 high. After the baptism of her mysterious sea sword rain last night, almost everyone from the other schools had been exhausted. Furthermore, they already didn't have any extra supplies to replenish their spirit chi and physical strength. No. 60 High's side, on the other hand, because Lotus Sun was constantly producing pills, everyone's spirit chi, physical strength and mental state were all relatively excellent. Thus, even if it was a one-on-one duel, Lotus Sun felt that number 60 High would still have the upper hand. Then it's a deal. Hearing that Lotus Sun had agreed to the duel, Nan Ishio was beyond excited. He took out the bamboo sticks that he had prepared beforehand and placed them in the bamboo tube for the 6 people on his side to draw. The names of each person from number 60 high were written on the bamboo sticks. Student Tang and Student E, you have the fewest number of people, so you get priority. All right. Tang Jingza stepped forward and drew a stick, but the person who drew it was Super Chin, which disappointed him a little since he actually wanted to fight Wang Ling more. Yi Jiang, on the other hand, held his temper and crossed his arms with a rather cold expression on his face. I don't need it. You can just give the rest to me. All right. Nan Ishio's lips curled up. After everyone had drawn lots, the dueling list had also been finalized. The first round of the promotion round. Tang Jingza against Hero Gua, Yi Jiang against Lotus Sun, Zhu Hanyun against Super Chin, Yen Xiaochun against Li Yuiwei, Four Eyes and South Sea Sky against Xia Ming. And the last person, Nan Ishio drew was Wang Ling. In fact, it was Nan Ishio who had arranged all the draws. Nan Ishio drawing Wang Ling had also been part of his plan, and he had drawn classmate Wang Ling, who was known as number 60 High's mascot, a top-class horse against a low-class horse. According to the rules of Tianji's horse race, Nan Ishio felt that he was very confident of advancing to the first round. Thinking this, Nan Ishio curled his lips and was secretly delighted. Classmate Wang Ling, I'm sorry. Wang Ling. Chapter 1202. After the lots were drawn, the one-on-one match officially began. There weren't any fancy rules because everyone had a protective golden talisman. As long as the protective golden talisman's life-saving effect was triggered, the match would be considered a victory. At that moment, there were only 12 people left on the domed mountain, but including the members of the special forces patrolling nearby, the commanders in the command center, the headmasters of each school, and the netizens who had been watching the live stream for several days, there were hundreds of millions of people watching this national body technique competition. The main reason this competition had attracted so much attention and discussion was that it was jointly organized by Huaxiao Alliance and the most popular sect in the world, the Office of Strategic Deception. The students who could survive until the last day were the cream of the crop among the current foundation establishment cultivators in the cultivation world, which was an important reference for parents in the cultivation world when choosing schools in the future. The first match was between Zhu Hanyun of Titan High School and Super Chin. In this situation, the contest between these two muscular men seemed to be particularly interesting. But Hero Guo wasn't optimistic about the outcome. Zhu Hanyun is the captain of Titan High School. Although he's exhausted physically, can Super Chin win? First of all, the Titan art that Zhu Hanyun cultivated was already very troublesome. His muscles were denser than an ordinary person's, and even if Super Chin used a spirit sword to slash out sword chi, he might not be able to pierce through it. Most importantly, this was a one-on-one duel on the surface. Using a spirit sword in a chaotic fight for survival was fine, but as a fair one-on-one duel, everyone couldn't help but think back to the original theme of this national competition, body technique. If they still used a spirit sword in this situation, there was an 80 to 90% chance that they would be accused of having an unfair advantage. Zhu Hanyun's side, who couldn't use a spirit sword and had to rely purely on body technique, had a natural advantage over Super Chin, who cultivated the Titan art and was famous for his body technique. But even so, Super Chin still had to fight. He wasn't a coward. As a descendant of Strength Super Martial Arts Dojo, he knew that his father would definitely be paying attention to this match. Looking at the abnormally powerful Zhu Hanyun in front of him, Super Chin felt a little bitter in his heart, but his attention was also raised to the extreme. Of course he knew how strong Zhu Hanyun was. In the first round, the other party had used his strength, which surpassed that of an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator, to turn himself into a cannon and launch his school students one by one from the ground to the top of the tower. A total of 700,000 steps were taken in a single leap. This had given Super Chin a huge shock at the time. While Super Chin was thinking, Dopigua's voice suddenly rang out. Super Chin, don't you like these kinds of muscular men the most? Fight him head on. Who's afraid of who? Even if I can't win, I'll still kill him with milk. Super Chin looked helpless. Wang Ling was also deeply aware that it wasn't good to be a milk of utility. Super Chin's blessed mouth would only work if it wasn't affected by any distracting thoughts. On the other side, Zhu Hanyun, who was also a muscular bro, seemed particularly enthusiastic about the word milk, and his expression gradually turned excited. Classmate Super Chin, you want to milk me? What a pity. Your chest isn't as big as mine. As soon as he said that, Zhu Hanyun threw a punch at Super Chin like a cannonball. Both of them were at the peak late foundation establishment stage. There was no difference in realms, but the advantage in cultivation techniques couldn't be ignored. Whether it was in terms of strength or speed, Zhu Hanyun's punch was actually above the peak late foundation establishment stage, and was almost infinitely close to the strength of an early golden core cultivator. Any student at the same realm might not be able to withstand the power of this punch. What was more, this wasn't an ordinary punch. Wang Ling could see wind and thunder twisting around Zhu Hanyun's fist as it came crashing down. Based on his Heavenly Dao spell, Zhu Hanyun's punch was probably a level 3 fist technique called Wind and Thunder Shock. It was already very astonishing for a foundation establishment student to learn a level 3 spirit technique. Although Zhu Hanyun looked like he had just learned it, it could still greatly enhance the power of an ordinary fist. In the blink of an eye, the punch had already reached Super Chin. To everyone's surprise, Super Chin didn't dodge at all. His eyes were fixed on the path of Zhu Hanyun's fist, and just as it was about to reach him, he suddenly shifted his position and used a skillful force to attack Zhu Hanyun's flank at the same time. Is this pushing hand? In the command center, all the headmasters watched this scene. Super Chin's pushing hand was simple and unadorned, but it made Zhu Hanyun's powerful blow feel like it had smashed heavily into a ball of cotton. Interesting, he actually thought of using the strength of 1,000 caddies to deal with it. Old Huang nodded in approval. He had seen it clearly from here. Zhu Hanyun's punch was extremely fast, and an average foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't be able to catch it at all. Pushing hand wasn't a complicated skill, but if you wanted to use it in actual combat, it would be very difficult for you to deal with an enemy unless you had painstakingly cultivated it for many years. It was like those people who thought they had actual combat ability after learning a set of army boxing. Learning and putting it into practice were two different things. Super Chen's ability to react so quickly in such a short period of time was something that could only be achieved after years of practice. But praise aside, old Huang still didn't know who would win this fight. He could see that Super Chen had a lot of combat experience. Perhaps it was because he had grown up in his family's martial arts dojo, and had seen a lot, learned a lot, and practiced a lot. Naturally, he had more combat experience than an ordinary person. But his opponent was the captain of Titan High School. If he thought that he could defeat the enemy with just one pushing hand, he would be underestimating Zhu Hanyun too much. Although he had lost the first move, Zhu Hanyun wasn't discouraged, and instead became braver as the fight went on. Once he was sure that Super Chen would play the 4 caddies to deal with 1,000 caddies routine, Zhu Hanyun quickly changed his boxing style. If the wind and thunder shock, at the beginning was about explosive power, then the chaotic rain Zhu Hanyun was now using, which relied on attack speed. Pushing hands, which could push 1,000 caddies with little effort, might have a surprising effect in the face of an explosive fist technique, but now that Zhu Hanyun had turned into a speed-type attack, even if Super Chen knew how to push hands, it would be of no use in the face of such a barrage of attacks. There was a rustling sound in the field, and each of Zhu Hanyun's punches landed solidly on Super Chen's body. Is he going to lose? Everyone from number 60 high school was extremely nervous. After the first round of attacks, Super Chen's face was covered in bruises, and he had even lost one of his teeth. It looked like he had already suffered an extremely serious injury. But to everyone's surprise, Super Chen's protective golden talisman hadn't been triggered. Under such astonishing attacks, his life-saving effect actually hadn't been triggered? Everyone was stupefied. As long as the protective golden talisman hadn't been triggered, it meant that Super Chen could still fight. This man's tenacity exceeded even Zhu Hanyun's expectations. Chapter 1203. After 2 rounds, it looked like Super Chen was just taking a beating. His face was already swollen like a pig's head, his body was covered in bruises, and even the upper half of his school uniform had been smashed by Zhu Hanyun's punches. Chaotic Rain was a high-density and high-attack technique, and its lethality was staggering. However, Zhu Hanyun wasn't completely unscathed under the relentless onslaught. After 2 rounds of one-sided attacks, his aura was already a little unstable. Zhu Hanyun wouldn't be able to use Chaotic Rain a second time in a short period of time, since it was a fist technique that tested endurance and energy consumption. Most importantly, Zhu Hanyun actually still had some misgivings and hadn't completely let loose. Considering that he could advance to the next round, Zhu Hanyun wanted to preserve some of his physical strength and spirit energy for the next round of battle. He had thought that his Chaotic Rain move would be enough to trigger Super Chen's protective golden talisman, but unfortunately the situation didn't go his way. Although it looked like Super Chen had already reached his limit, and he might be able to trigger the protective golden talisman with just one ordinary punch, a competition was a competition and there was no room for luck. Zhu Hanyun felt that he had miscalculated against Super Chen. If he hadn't taken the competition into account when he had used Chaotic Rain in the second round, and had instead focused on dealing with the current situation, Super Chen might have already been eliminated. But unfortunately there were no ifs in this world. I've been studying martial arts under my father's guidance since I was a child, and I've grown up with various senior brothers and sisters. I'm afraid it won't be that easy for you to knock me down. Super Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Although his teeth had been broken, this injury might really be nothing to him. In order to write his essay, Wang Ling had specially flipped through Super Chen's childhood memories, and the toughness in Super Chen's bones had really been passed down from his ancestors. Fighting above one's level was commonplace. If the people you practiced with since you were a child were always 2 or 3 levels higher than you on average, you might also be able to take a beating like this. So, this kind of man wouldn't just knock down like that. From this point of view, Super Chen and Wang Zhen were actually a little similar. The difference was that Super Chen had been forced to take a beating when he practiced with others, while Wang Zhen had been actively trained since he was a child, and even had to beat himself up. So when Wang Zhen, who was watching from the sidelines at that moment, saw Super Chen's indomitable spirit, he couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. This was a promising talent. While Super Chen was talking, Zhu Hanyun quickly adjusted his breathing. As the team leader of Titan High School, even if he couldn't help the school win the competition in the end, he absolutely couldn't lose to an ordinary number 60 high representative. Classmate Super Chen, why are you doing this? A helpless expression appeared on Zhu Hanyun's face. You should make better use of your golden protective light. Relying on your own tenacity to persevere in the competition will only bring you harm. Although my Chaotic Rain flow just now was lenient and didn't directly attack your vital acupuncture points, but at the same time I sealed off many of your acupuncture points. You should already be unable to use your spiritual power now. Under the state of having your spirit sealed by me, you basically have no chance of winning. Why don't you surrender earlier? As soon as he finished speaking, the scene boiled up again. Super Chen's spirit has been sealed? Hero Gua frowned deeply. Sealing a spirit was like hitting an acupoint. Although it was only temporary, it was absolutely taboo for a cultivator to have their spirit sealed in the middle of a fight. Hearing Zhu Hanyun's words, Super Chen clenched his teeth. Even if it's a spirit sealed, it won't be so easy for you to defeat me. Maybe you even help me open up some Rendu air making me stronger." Hearing this, Zhu Hanyun immediately sneered. "What a joke, do you think this kind of thing can happen to you?" In the process of receiving a one-sided beating, there was indeed the possibility of an acupoint being opened up, but the probability was so low that it was almost the same as winning the lottery. But in the third round, Super Chen was the first to attack. Even though he was injured all over, not only did Super Chen's speed and strength not weaken in the slightest, they actually looked even stronger than before. Even though his spirit had been sealed, he was still able to display such a powerful explosive power. Zhu Hanyun looked at Super Chen's burning gaze incredulously, his face full of disbelief. "Impossible. Everything is reasonable, nothing is impossible." Super Chen punched Zhu Hanyun's face fiercely. To everyone's surprise, the Titan art that Zhu Hanyun cultivated didn't seem to have any effect at that moment. With Super Chen's punch, Zhu Hanyun was directly sent flying like a kite with a broken string. He landed heavily on the ground, leaving only a shallow pit. What the hell is going on? On the side, Xiaoming was puzzled. Classmate Zhu Hanyun's Titan art has already reached a certain level, and he weighs several thousand jin. There's no way he could have been sent flying so easily. Everyone turned to look at Zhu Hanyun's little junior sister, Yan Xiaochun. Seeing her puckered little mouth and anxious expression, a lot of people realized that Super Chen might have accidentally broken some vital part of the Titan art. While a lot of people were guessing what on earth had happened, Wang Ling had already seen through the answer to the questionnaire. For a body technique cultivator, sealing a spirit actually didn't mean much, since martial body techniques relied more on one's qi, or qigong. The reason why Zhu Hanyun paid so much attention to maintaining his spirit energy was largely because of the Titan art he cultivated. When he was full of spirit energy, Zhu Hanyun, who cultivated the Titan art, was like a balloon filled with air, his body brimming with tension. The density of his body would also increase with the technique, and he would look as indestructible and as heavy as Mount Tai. However, once his spirit energy was consumed, Zhu Hanyun's weight would also drop. This was like a balloon leaking air. The consequence of his weight loss was naturally that his body wouldn't be as dense as before. That was why Zhu Hanyun's body had been so easily shaken by Super Chen's punch. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary punch naturally wouldn't have been able to do this. "Where does your strength come from?" Zhu Hanyun crawled up from the ground, still trying hard to recover his spirit energy. At the same time, he was astonished by the strength of Super Chen's punch. "Didn't I tell you? Your chaotic rain flow seems to have stimulated my body. I feel like all the cells in my body are boiling now, and there's a steady stream of energy pouring out." Super Chen looked even more excited. Zhu Hanyun's body swayed at these words. F***K, had he run into a legendary expert at running his mouth? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.